Chapter 23. Temari finished up the story with a flourish, pointing her finger into the air. And that's what all has happened, Kira-san. The story ends with us trying to find you. Kira nodded his head resolutely, his glasses bobbing slightly as he leaned back against the boulder. You still haven't told me what exactly this alliance you want with me is. Temari took a deep breath, praying that he wouldn't break into any more bad rhymes, and coughed to get his attention. We want you to help us take out Akatsuki. We're not sure what their true goal is, only the superficial ones. We need you to help us so that those goals don't become reality. Kira snorted and put his arms behind his head. I dunno. Sounds like a marriage of convenience to me. What do I get out of this? Naruto's voice grew serious as he took a half step forward. Your life. Kira's eyes snapped over to the other Jinchuriki. Is that a threat? No, it's a fact. Akatsuki will kill you and then leave your soulless husk to rot. At least if we're together, then we have a chance to survive. I've survived so far. I doubt they even know where to look for me. Temari blinked and her lips curled into a tiny sneer. We knew how to find you. All it takes is the right person gathering information. If we can find you, they can find you. Kira grinned and sat upright on the boulder. There's a profound difference between me and other hosts though, Missy. Other hosts fight the demon. I didn't. I accepted it as part of me. Temari and Naruto were at a loss for words and Kira took that for disbelief. Don't you understand? I'm in perfect harmony with my bijou. I don't fight it, I don't insult it, I don't ignore it. I made peace with it. There is no host. There is no demon. There is only Hachi Kira. I am the Hachibi. Naruto leaned forward, awed by this. So you mean you can control your beast? In a manner of speaking. It's more like we coexist, just to exist. Without one cog pushing the other, the clock doesn't work. We both need to turn in rhythm to keep going. Temari put a finger to her chin. Explains his love of rap and rhythm. I don't need a group to protect me. I'm perfectly fine on my own. Naruto frowned and shook his head. Let me share a little information with you. Kira leaned forward, his hands on his knees. There is a certain spider living in Suna, and the rest of the world, known as the Granddaddy Long Legs. It is a very small, unassuming spider that children play with and laugh at. It is the most poisonous spider in the world and yet, it cannot harm those bigger than it, because its mouth is too small to bite the person holding it. So, one of the most dangerous beasts in the world is helpless against those who would be victims to its mighty poison. He cast his gaze upon Kira and glared. We Jinchuriki are like this. The strong can be toppled by the weak. Humans have no natural poison, no natural defense, except for our minds. We can make conscious decisions that go beyond the natural norm. Most of the time it actually clouds our judgment, but this is one time where it shouldn't. We're the spider, Kira, and the Akatsuki are the mean children who would pull off our legs. Separately, we can accomplish little, but if two of us were to band together, we could take them. After all, we hold the strongest of the bijou. Kira threw back his head and laughed long and hard. Temari grew angry when it showed no sign of stopping and slammed her hand on the rock, making an echoing sound, to stop him. What's so damn funny? We're being serious here. Kira stopped laughing and locked eyes with the blonde wind mistress. Do you really believe that tails denote how powerful these beasts are? Think about it. They're nothing more than chakra constructs. Shikaku was insane, but he could have easily been one of the most powerful bijou. His power to control sand was most formidable. There is sand everywhere, and where there isn't, it doesn't take much to make it. Other bijou have powers. What does the Kyubi have? He looked at the two blondes as they sat in confusion, waiting for his answer. Power. Total, unrivaled power. Mastery over nothing, just enough raw power to do anything and be good at none of it. How else do you explain a disaster of nature being stopped? How many people can stop a hurricane? Or a tsunami? No one. You can't stop nature. Naruto smiled and kicked himself off the wall he'd been leaning against. How about a wager then? Since you're being contrary, and we can't go home empty-handed, I propose that we have a contest. Kira perked up immediately, as did Temari. Contest? What kind of contest? I'm going to show you that nature can be controlled. I'll show you my talent, in good faith, and you show me yours. An innate ability that you have. Show me your strength, what you're known for, and I'll show you mine. If you win, we'll leave. If I win, you come back with us. Kira nodded his head and walked towards the darker parts of the cave. Give me a moment to think about that. I'll be right back. Temari calmly walked over and grabbed Naruto by his ear, jerking it down to where she could speak in it. He protested her abuse of his poor ear and she twisted it a bit harder. What are you thinking? We want him to come with us. What if you don't win this contest? Naruto whined a little more and squinted his eyes. He wasn't coming with us otherwise. We can't force him to come. Alliances don't work like that. He needs to come willingly, and this is a surefire way to get him to do it. Sanzoku, who had been knocked from his perch around Naruto's neck when he was hit by Kira's punch earlier, crawled out of the shadows and up Temari's side, letting himself curl around her shoulders. Are you sure that you can win, boss? Your luck hasn't exactly been very forthcoming lately. I'm alive, aren't I? What more proof do you need? Kira chose that moment to emerge from the darkness and blinked when he saw Sanzoku. I didn't think you had a fur wrap when you came in, little lady. I'm not a wrap, you imbecile. I'm a summon. Holy shit. That thing talks. He walked over and began poking Sanzoku all over, getting all manner of little grunts and growls out of the agitated red panda. Never seen a fur wrap that could talk. Or move. That's weird as hell. I'm not a fur wrap, you poor excuse for a poet. Kira's eyes narrowed and his backbone straightened. Are you dissing my rhymes? Yes. Your rhymes suck. Kira backed away and stuck his finger in Sanzoku's nose. You take that back. My rhymes are fresh and funky. They're funky fresh. They're funky because they're not fresh, you idiot. Temari listened with a smirk as the two argued, rubbing her hand along Sanzoku's back. She and the furball might not always see eye to eye, but at least he could recognize bad lyrics as well as she could. She'd have to remember to give him a treat when they got home. Kira and Sanzoku were now nose to nose and snarling at each other. Sanzoku had unwrapped himself from Temari's shoulders and had his front paws resting on her head, growling at Kira. Temari, for once, didn't mind since Sanzoku was belittling a man who annoyed her. Just admit that you're not any good at rhyming and I'll stop saying you suck. Well, you're so quick to pass judgment, why don't you bust out a rhyme, you freaking throw rug? I know I can't rap. I'm saying you shouldn't. Naruto sighed and stepped between the two. Sanzoku, be quiet. Kira, what is your decision? Sanzoku immediately clammed up with a huff and wrapped himself around Temari's shoulders as he glared at the large black man, receiving a scratch behind his ears as reward for ruffling Kira's feathers. Kira blinked and turned his head to look at Naruto. Quite a present you got there. What's your profession? Naruto grinned and cracked his knuckles. If you come with us, I'll tell you. Now, your skill? Kira nodded and sighed while walking toward the entrance. We're going to need to be outside for this. It's too cramped in here. He stepped outside and his hand covered his eyes immediately. Oh, hairy balls of the gods, it's bright out here. Goddamn ball of fire, circling the goddamn earth, why don't you snuff out? Naruto and Temari followed the grumbling Jinchuriki out, shielding their eyes from the brightness after being in the dark so long. Kira stretched and contorted himself before pointing at Naruto. I need your help. Come over here. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Why? Because to groove right, you gotta have a partner. Naruto blanched and took a half step back, slightly behind Temari. I don't swing that way. I'm dating her. Kira froze and turned to the blonde, his glare clearly felt through his sunglasses. Not like that, you idiot. I'm talking about my skill. Now get over here or I'm just going to go back inside and not listen to you anymore. Naruto ambled over and stood before the irritated Jinchuriki. Kira took a deep breath and settled into a fighting stance. Attack me. Naruto blinked owlishly. What? Attack me. Don't strike for earnest, you know, to kill, and neither will I. I'm going to show you my skill. I promise that you'll feel the blade, but it will not cut you. I need you to set the beat so I can get my groove on. Naruto nodded once and rushed forward, jabbing out at Kira. The black man began to nod his head to an unheard beat, his shoulders bobbing, and his face set into a grin. Before Naruto could even see, the man had drawn a sword and jabbed it forward, tapping it against Naruto's cheek. The blonde leapt back as Kira's body gyrated to his own rhythm. Without warning, Kira threw the rest of his swords into the air and ran for Naruto, slashing this way and that. Naruto felt the dull edge of the sword touch him and shivered, knowing that it could just as well have shaved some skin from him. He leapt away again and watched as Kira took up a crane position and the swords dropped into place. One in each hand, one in his mouth, one in each fold of his arms, one caught and held in the fold of his uplifted right knee, and one held under his left armpit. Temari and Sanzoku watched with awe as Kira began to pinwheel around, the swords sometimes flying into the air, only to be caught on the way down as another sword began its own ascent. Naruto was kept in constant motion and Kira, the self-proclaimed killer bee, never stopped moving, always keeping in time with that unheard beat. Naruto kept moving backwards and in a circle, lest he fall off the plateau they were on. With a final lurch, Naruto was backed against the edge of the plateau and Kira was turned sideways, his glasses revealing him looking at Naruto out of the corner of his eyes. He stood in the crane stance again, all the swords pointing at Naruto. The one that had been under his left armpit was gone, but it was quickly found again as it fell from the sky and the dull edge slid down Naruto's back, landing in the rock and embedding itself. The two Suna shinobi and Sanzoku all spoke in a hushed, odd voice. Whoa. Damn. Shiite. Kira flipped backwards, launching all the swords into the air and then knelt down. The three were awed further as all the swords landed in their respective sheaths and Kira stood upright again, a smug grin on his face. I didn't think springing my bijou on you would be a fair thing, since we can both do that to an extent. My art of the sword is unbeatable and, if I may say so, pretty damn impressive. That was just my warm-up dance. The true tango is much more deadly and much, the three leaned in, waiting for what he was about to say. More sexy. It's all in the skill, sucker, 'cause I'm a righteous, bad mother. Few Temari and Sanzoku stepped forward, growling as one. You finish that horrible lyric and I'll bash your head in. What she doesn't bash, I'll bite. Kira looked at the ground deflated, mumbling to himself. No one appreciates good rhymes. He bounced back quickly, though, and pointed his finger at Naruto. Beat that, boy. Unless you can really harness nature like you said, you ain't got nothing. I know about your Rasengan. That doesn't count. Naruto looked around at the rocky terrain and then to Temari and Sanzoku. Both gave him a wry grin. He turned back to Kira and smirked. Tell me, Hachi Kira, can plant life grow up here on the mountain? Kira was taken aback by this and cocked his eyebrow quizzically. Not much. Some wild brush, but nothing else. Why? Naruto didn't answer and instead held his hand out in front of him. Kira's eyes went wide when Naruto's staff erupted from the stone and leapt into his hand. He quickly schooled his features back to indifference. If that was your technique, it was a cool trick, but nothing special that wasn't my ability. Kira turned his head to the side slightly, his lips in a thin line. Then what is? Naruto's answer was to chuckle and close his eyes as a thin green aura began to envelop his body. Kira sighed as they walked along the road back to Konoha, his hands firmly implanted in his pockets. I can't believe I was outdone by a schoolteacher. A Chunin schoolteacher, no less. Man, that sucks. Temari giggled from her spot beside the man and he threw a hateful glare at her. What the hell are you laughing at? Temari smiled at the man, her spirit high. They had succeeded in their mission, and once they'd checked in with the Hokage, they'd be able to go home. She hadn't felt this good in a while. Oh, nothing. I just think that you'll like getting out and about. You've been on that mountain for quite a while from what you've told us. It'll do you good to see some new places. I happen to like my privacy, little lady. Besides, you'd be surprised what I can hear up on that mountaintop. I hear all kinds of things. Temari leaned forward, suddenly interested. Oh? Like what? I've heard all about your boyfriend and his vendetta against the Akatsuki and the Uchiha brothers. The news that carries on the wind is somewhat old, but I do learn of the outside world. It keeps me sane. He sighed and kicked a stone out of his path. Naruto and Temari were both listening intently now, while Sanzoku slept. I wasn't one of the Jinchuriki who was abused, or threatened, or anything of that sort. I was ignored to the fullest, sent up to that fake shrine, and left. Someone would bring me some food every now and then, but I quickly learned that they didn't want to speak to me. I was to be taught swordsmanship and the abilities of the ninja. That was all. Nothing more, nothing less. I was to be their trump card, their ace in the hole, their secret weapon. They sent the best swordsman of Kumo to teach me how to handle blades. Soon, there was nothing else they could teach me. I was the best. So, they sent the best ninjutsu masters to teach me how to handle my element, Raiten. Soon, there was also nothing left to teach me in that respect, and I was alone again. Then, it spoke to me. It tried to take over my body, but I would not cave. I tried to force it into submission, but it would not submit. After many years, we came to a conclusion. We were both stuck together, forever, and there was nothing we could do about it. So, we agreed to bond. Naruto perked up and his ears twitched in anticipation. Bond? Kira nodded and turned his attention back to the road. Yeah, bond. He would give me his power and I would give him mine. Essentially, there is no Hachibi anymore and there is no Kira. So, we became Hachi-Kira, an amalgamation of the best of both. His power and my slick rhymes. Temari sighed and readjusted her fan since it was digging into her back. I don't know about the slick rhymes, but your life has been typical of a Jinchuriki. Loneliness, fear, hatred, these all seem to be commonplace things. My brother had it worst, I think. Our own father kept trying to have him assassinated. Kira nodded his head and pushed his glasses back up on his nose. The host of Shikaku. I've heard that his Bijou no longer inhabits his body. How is that possible? Naruto watched a civilian couple pass them by and then turned to Kira again. The woman who originally sealed Shikaku into him sacrificed her life with a rebirth jutsu so that he could live again. Now he has the power over sand, but Shikaku isn't tormenting him anymore. Kira nodded and the three walked on in silence for quite a while. As they neared a town and dark began to settle, Kira looked up at the appearing moon and smiled sadly. I don't know what I'd do if I were to suddenly find myself without my bijou. It's been with me all my life. When I was lonely, at least I knew it was there. Despite the hardships it has brought upon me, it has given me other comforts. He turned to Naruto once more. What would you feel if you woke up tomorrow and the Kyuubi was gone? Temari and a now awake Sanzoku listened intently as Naruto stared straight ahead. I wouldn't know what to do. The bijou can't just disappear from the world, so that would mean that he's loose. I wouldn't ever let that happen. He cast his gaze upon the rest of his group, his face grim. I wouldn't wish this curse on anyone else. I'm not sure anyone else could handle it. I wouldn't even wish the Kyuubi on another Jinchuriki. Kira smiled and winced at the loudness of the town. He was going to hate this, he could tell. Sleep would not be forthcoming. I see we're of like minds then. These things are both a curse and a blessing, making us neither angel nor demon. We are something else entirely. Temari wrapped her arm around Naruto's and squeezed it. You're both human. You're humans with a burden that none of the rest of us could shoulder. That's what makes you strong. Naruto smiled down at her and squeezed her arm. Kira looked on with a smirk at the happy couple. See what I gotta put up with all the time? If you think that's disgusting, then by all means, live by yourself for your whole life. Seeing that just gives me hope that someone will shower me with affection someday. Of course, they have to love me and my dope rap. 'Cause Kira is a party that's always on tap. People hear my flow and all come on the run. Wherever the killer bee's standing is the spot with all the fun. Temari palmed her face, mostly to hide the embarrassment since they had just entered the town and people were beginning to stare. Please, someone, anyone shut him up. Naruto just laughed and kissed her cheek. Tsunade sat at her desk, pondering on whether or not to risk taking a sip of sake, when she heard a familiar voice outside her door. I don't care what her schedule says. You open that damn door or I'll kick it in. Her secretary, a chunin who was only recently promoted, sounded very angry. And I don't care who you think you are. You two are Suna shinobi and he's a shinobi of Kumo. I don't know who you think you are, but you aren't getting in without an appointment. Tsunade was just about to get up and let the chunin know who was at the door, when the door to her office warped and bent suddenly before tearing off her hinges and flying right for her. Tsunade watched it come and flung her hand out, knocking the heavy oaken door aside and through the window, where it landed with a boom on the street below, sending bystanders scattering. She smirked when she saw what was on the other side of the door. Naruto stood sideways in the doorway with his hand outstretched, the remainders of the chakra from the Rasengan still wisping around his hands, as the chunin stood gape-mouthed. You owe me a door, Naruto. Temari shook her head in exasperation and muscled her way around Naruto, dragging Kira with her. Tsunade raised an eyebrow as she looked the well-muscled man up and down. Kira caught that Tsunade was appraising him and grinned at her, waggling his eyebrows. So, you checking out ol' Hachi Kira, huh? Well, Hachi Kira only has one question for you. Beautiful Temari grimaced and held her breath. She prayed he wasn't about to look foolish in front of the Hokage. Do I make you randy? Dandy? Hope you got a sweet tooth. 'Cause I'm sweet like Temari clapped a hand over his mouth as Tsunade's eyes grew wide. Kira glared at Temari for ruining his flow and slowly closed his mouth. Tsunade regained her composure and leaned forward. What the hell was that? It's the way Kira talks. He has an affinity for rhyming in his speech. Tsunade looked at Naruto out of the corner of her eyes and then back to Kira. Please refrain from speaking like that in my presence. It's annoying. Kira sighed and hung his head in defeat. Nobody appreciates my rhymes. Naruto patted Kira on the back, consoling him, while Temari shook her head and addressed the Hokage. Tsunade-sama, this is Hachi Kira, the host of the eight-tailed beast. He's agreed. I was suckered. Temari sighed and continued on. Agreed to help us. At least he's agreed to come to Suna with us. We'll figure out more there. Tsunade nodded her head and stood. Well then, I welcome you, Hachi Kira, to Konoha no Sato. How long will you be staying before returning to Suna, you three? One night. No need to alert Hinata. We'll just get hotel rooms tonight. We've been away from home for too long. Tsunade winced and averted her eyes to Naruto for a moment. He simply stared ahead, not seeming to care. A small, wistful sigh escaped her lips, which Kira caught. His eyes darted from one blonde to the next, storing that information in his head to ask later. Tsunade nodded her head and walked around the desk, enveloping Naruto in a hug. Come see us again later, brat. You don't have to be a stranger just because you live in Suna. Naruto hugged her back and let go, his arms falling to his side. His eyes locked with Kira's suspicious ones for a moment as he led the way to the door and held it open for the others. Let's get lunch, huh? I'm starving. Naruto felt small all through lunch as Kira looked at him with new intensity. It seemed he had suddenly become a puzzle to his new ally that the man couldn't figure out. As they checked into their hotel, Kira grabbed Naruto before he could follow Temari into their room. She turned around, giving him a curious look as he waved at her. I need to borrow your boyfriend for a minute. I'll give him back in a moment. Temari watched as the door was slammed in her face and turned to a bewildered Sanzoku, who sat on the bed. What was all that about? I dunno. That guy is weird as hell. I don't try to understand him. I agree. Kira folded his arms and leaned against the wall, observing Naruto as he sat on the edge of the bed. What's this all about, boy? That cutie seemed to know you intimately. I thought you were a Suna shinobi? Naruto sighed and leaned his forearms on his knees, staring at the floor. I used to be a Konoha shinobi. Kira blinked and shook his head. What? Are you a missing mean? Naruto chuckled. No. Nothing like that. I asked for a transfer. You see, I had some grievances against the Council of Konoha that couldn't be ironed out, so I asked to leave. The Kazekage is a friend of mine, so it wasn't all that hard. Kira's eyes hardened and he glared at Naruto. Who are you really? I know you're a Jinchuriki, I know what you hold. But who are you? You're obviously an important person. Naruto sat silent for a few moments before locking eyes with his new ally. I'm the self-disowned son of the Yondaime Hokage. My name at birth should have been Namake's Naruto, but I refused to go by it. Instead, I was given my mother's maiden name and it's what I go by to this day. Kira whistled appreciatively. The son of a Kage, huh? That's a hell of a pedigree, kid. Yeah, it is. But I didn't live up to it earlier on. I wasn't the most well-liked person. No one truly wanted anything to do with me. Unlike you, who was raised to be a weapon and taught how to defend yourself, my village left me hanging out to dry. Kira perked up at that. You mean they didn't train you to be a weapon? Naruto shook his head. Nope. Unlike most Jinchuriki, I think they honestly wanted me to die. If I had any skill, any way to protect myself, that would mean that the Kyuubi could live on another day. But your Mokuton, it's not Mokuton. It's a force of nature that only I can control. I have complete power over plants. I can make them grow anywhere and I can grow anything. It was a power I was appointed with, unlike the Kyuubi. I was chosen for the green. But what is it? It was an awesome power and I felt little to no chakra in it. That's because it is nature. I'm not creating jutsu, I'm creating life. You should see what I've done with Suna. Kira nodded his head and the room fell silent again until he spoke up once more. Even with a different background, even if we weren't all treated the same, it all comes back to one unforgivable truth. He and Naruto looked at each other with understanding. No one wanted us. Kira nodded his head and looked out the window. Yeah, no one wanted us. The two fell silent again, listening to the birds outside the window as they chirped merrily. You can go back to your woman now, Naruto. I just wanted to know. Naruto nodded, but didn't move. You know, Kira, you can stay in Suna with us. Once this is over, you don't have to go back to that shrine. Kira eyed him suspiciously as Naruto grinned at him. If you like caves so much, there's a cave on my property. I'm sure the raccoons wouldn't mind sharing it with such an awesome dude as yourself. Kira chuckled at that and sighed. Maybe. We'll have to see what happens. Our future isn't looking very bright right now. I know a girl who would love a guy like you. Open, honest, muscular, talented with his mouth, so to speak. Kira quirked an eyebrow and grinned lecherously. Oh yeah? What's her name? Naruto grinned devilishly and drew the woman's outline in the air. Urameshi Kari. Kari and Kira, I like that. It's easy talking to another Jinchuriki, isn't it? Like talking to someone you've known your whole life. Now, tell me a little more about this Kari. Temari looked up from her book when Naruto walked in. Sanzoku curled up beside her, snoring away. Hey, babe. What was that all about? Kira wanted to know who I was. He leapt onto the bed, landing hard, and sending Sanzoku flying into the air. The red panda snarled and launched at Naruto, who caught him by the nape of his neck, narrowly avoiding his claws, and held him at arm's length until Sanzoku calmed down. Temari giggled as he gave the summon a stern stare. Are you gonna be good now? Yeah. Naruto sat him down beside him and Sanzoku curled up on his pillow, growling softly at the blonde man. Temari snuggled into his side and went back to reading her book as he wrapped an arm around her. Whatcha reading? HM? Oh, a book on cooking. I figure if we live together, I can't let you cook all the meals. Tima-chan? HM? Remember the last time you cooked? HM. It tried to come to life. Gaara had to kill it with his sand. We ate out that night. It wasn't that bad. Temari. It growled at Kankuro. Everything growls at Kankuro. It tried to bite Gaara. Lots of things dislike Gaara. It bit me. You probably deserved it. Naruto sighed and took the book out of her hands, holding it over his head as she reached for it. Hey! Gimme that back. No. Leave the cooking to me. Temari folded her arms and leaned back against the headboard. Then what am I supposed to do around the house? Naruto grinned and kissed her on the lips. Look pretty. Temari grinned into the kiss and caressed his cheek with her left hand. I guess I can handle that. Trying to sleep here. Then go sleep with Kira. I'm sure he isn't making any noise. I'll just go sleep in the bathroom. Temari giggled as he shut the door behind him and turned back to Naruto. Now, where were we? The trip to Suna was not a fun one. Kira grumbled the whole way, complaining about the heat as they crossed the desert and the overall brightness of the sun. Temari was quickly losing her patience, and Naruto he just wanted to be at home and away from at least one grumpy person. He knew he could calm Temari down at least. Temari was just about on her last nerve when they topped a dune and she cried out in happiness. There it is. Sunagakure. Home. Kira squinted his eyes and shielded them from the sun with his hand, looking out over the shimmering sand. Huh, well I'll be damned. There really are trees inside the walls. And grass growing around the walls themselves. I gotta see this. Temari grinned and took off again, calling over her shoulder. Wait till you see the property. Unfortunately, such pleasantries had to wait as they had to report in to Gaara. The three stood before the redhead as he eyed them all. I don't believe there has ever been a gathering of more than 2 Jinchuriki in any such manner. This is a momentous occasion. Kira dug in his ear boredly. Yeah, huh. Where's the nearest bar so I can get a drink? I'm parched. Gaara snorted and a small smile crossed his face. You're just like Naruto, always worried about your next meal instead of what's important. You three go rest and see me in the morning. We'll do this then. Naruto, Temari? The two turned in the doorway and Gaara closed his eyes as he nodded his head toward them. Welcome home. We all missed you. The two blondes grinned and led Kira out. Where are we going? My property. You'll love it. He did love it. Temari and Naruto watched as Kira bounded around the place like a little kid, sampling all the fruits and drinking from the stream. He finally ran back over, his face set in a wide grin. Show me where I'll be sleeping tonight. Temari cocked her head to the side. Are you sure you'd rather not sleep at a hotel? We can arrange accommodations. Kira shook his head and Naruto led them to the cave. Wait here. I'll need to ask the caretakers if they will let you stay. He didn't wait for their answer and walked inside into the main chamber and knelt on his knees, a feeling of calmness and peace washing over him. Caretakers, I've come to ask a favor. 2 raccoons, slightly above the average size, waddled out of the shadows, gold and blue vests adorning their bodies. The female of the two sat on her haunches and clasped her paws together. What do you need, Naruto-sama? Ask, and we shall try to grant it. I need you to let a new friend of mine stay here. He is a Jinchuriki as well and is used to living in caves. I thought he would be more comfortable here. The male nodded his head and clasped his paws together as well. Bring him here, that we may see him and determine his intent. Naruto nodded and rose, walking back to the entrance and motioning for Kira to follow him. Temari was miffed that she had to stay put, but her mood lightened when the kids came out to play with her. Kira followed Naruto into the chamber and knelt beside Naruto. He felt a sense of calm wash over him and closed his eyes. This room, it's mystic, isn't it? Yes, it is. Welcome, Hachi Kira. Please remain still so that we may determine if you can stay. Kira sat motionless, his eyes closed, and allowed the two raccoons to pull his arms away from his body until he sat as if receiving a blessing. The male raccoon nodded to the female and they arranged Kira's limbs back to their former state. He is not the purest being in the world, but we will allow him to stay. Perhaps while he stays here, he can find peace with himself. He may stay in the main chamber. The kids will see to it that he isn't lonely. Kira nodded his consent and was about to rise when the female raccoon pulled on his hand. Stay. Let the energies flow over you. By morning, I promise, you'll feel right as rain. Kira bowed his head to the raccoons and spoke to Naruto as he settled into a lotus position. I shall see you in the morning. I feel like I can almost touch heaven here. Naruto chuckled and rose to his feet, bowing to the raccoons. Thank you, caretakers. I'll bring you something good to eat on my next trip to the sea. Thank you, Naruto-sama. We appreciate it as always. Carry on in your mission. Do not falter. He nodded and walked out, casting one look back at the prone Kira, who sat as unmoving as a statue. The kids squealed happily when they saw him and Temari stood, the one who liked her hair, or was it a different one? She couldn't tell since they all looked the same, planted firmly atop her head. Naruto leaned forward and kissed her. Come on. Let's go home. We have a lot to do tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Well, we have to talk to Gaara, get Kira settled, and then we start on the house. It's the start of a new day, Temari. She smiled and locked her arm in his as they walked toward the village. The sun was setting and cast its purple and gold and orange and yellow hues beautifully on the horizon. Sunrise, sunset, will they always begin and end with such beautiful colors? He gave her a loving smile and squeezed her arm. As long as you're with me, every day will be beautiful. She smacked his arm playfully. Flatterer. It won't get you anywhere. But it is nice to hear. I believe it's already gotten me somewhere, my dear. Oh? And where is that? Your heart. She snorted and wiped a tear from her eye, from laughter at his absurdness or the touching things he was saying, he couldn't tell. Idiot. I fell for you because you were like a little puppy. I just couldn't kick you away. And now? She grinned evilly. Well, now I have the puppy on a leash and he'll do whatever I tell him. Why let go of such an obedient pet now? They both laughed and walked onward toward the compound until Temari spoke up again, humor in her voice. You know, a leash sounds, don't even think about it. Chapter 24. Kira stretched lazily as he looked around the cavern, its multifaceted gem-like surface throwing prisms of light everywhere. It made for quite the surreal experience, one he could continue to live with for quite a while. Unfortunately, he had to meet the Kazekage, hang out with Naruto, and, to his unbidden glee, meet a supposedly hot chick named Urameshi Kari. Yep, life was good for old Hachi Kira. He stood upright with a happy sigh and rolled his neck from side to side. He hadn't felt this rested in some time and he hadn't even slept. He'd merely meditated the entire night. You would do well to stay close to this Uzumaki, Naruto. I feel a change coming in the world and your brother will not take your leaving very lightly. Kira snorted and put his hands behind his head. My brother is of no consequence at the moment. My students should be able to take care of protecting Kumogakure in my absence. Besides, who the hell would want to invade that place? The eight-tailed ox rolled its eyes. Be that as it may, there is a revolution coming and you will be instrumental in it, as will I. The boy who holds the Kyuubi will be the catalyst for all this. Take my advice and stay beside him. Before Kira could reply, the ox faded into the background of his mind, content with having said its piece. The bearded man hated when his beast did that, but it was eccentric as well as powerful. He'd learned to put up with its nonsense over his years as its host. A faint sound echoed in from outside the cave and Kira stiffened, turning his head slightly to catch the noise better. It sounded like people shouting and hammers knocking against wood. He could only suppose it was Naruto. He slowly padded across the crystal floor and cursed inwardly as the sunlight bounced off the entrance and into his eyes. With a readjustment of his glasses, he stepped out and put a hand over his brow to help shield him from the accursed light. The world was a blaze of white for a moment before his eyes adjusted to the searing desert sun. He blinked, letting the moisture wash away a grain of sand that had gotten under his glasses, and gaped at the scene before him. To his right were literally hundreds of Narutos, performing various tasks as they prepared the foundation of his soon-to-be house for the walls. He watched in awe as they brought stones from a quarry over a mile away in scrolls and deposited them on the ground before heading back for more. Several Narutos waited for the stones to hit the ground before measuring out the desired shape and thickness of the foundation and cutting them with wind chakra. All of this was done under the watchful eye of a local stonemason, who observed the proceedings with great interest. He would shout at the Narutos when they cut the stone wrong and help them lay the tiles in the correct places. They already had half the foundation done on a very large home. Straight ahead, he could see several Narutos working on cutting down trees and dragging them to an empty site, where even more waited to trim the branches off and slice the tree into lumber for the frame. He marveled at the use of wind chakra in such an unorthodox way. He marveled even more when, for every tree that he cut down, Naruto would raise another from the ground. With a final twist of his head to the left, he saw what he guessed were Naruto's students, running drills and exercising under the watchful eye of yet another Naruto. It amazed him that the blonde could do all these things and still show no ill effect. The fact that he apparently used none of the Kyuubi's chakra to do it made it all the more astonishing. Enjoying the sights, Kira? The bearded man glanced upwards and saw 4 shadows covering his exit. He cautiously stepped into the sun and shielded his eyes again as he looked upward. He recognized Temari and Naruto's outlines, but he didn't recognize the other two. A flash of teeth brought his attention to Naruto's face as he grinned at his newfound ally. "Morning. Hope you slept well, 'cause we've got a busy day ahead of us." Kira snorted and threw his thumb over his shoulder, pointing in the direction of the madness behind him. "Seems like you got an early start. I didn't realize that I'd stayed in the caverns that late." It's not all that late. It's only a bit past 1. Anyway, Kira, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Kankuro, current premier puppeteer of Sunagakure." The black-clad man with the scrolls on his back waved at Kira jovially. Naruto pointed to the other one. "And this, as you already know, is Gaara, the Kazekage. He's been most eager to meet you again this morning." Kira, while not the most respectful of individuals to anyone, recognized the Kage for who they were and the power that came along with the positions. Besides, he was an ally, right? It wouldn't hurt his reputation as a badass too much. He bowed at the waist to Gaara. "Kazekage-sama, it is an honor to meet you again." Gaara nodded his head, his arms folded across his chest. "Likewise. You can drop the formalities, Hachi Kira. There are certain days I don't like to be reminded of my position. Simply call me Gaara. Now then, let's retire to my office. It's much more comfortable there and I'll send for some breakfast." Kira grinned at the thought of food and rubbed his palms together. Breakfast sounds good." Temari sighed and linked her arm in Naruto's as they headed for the Kage Tower. "Great. Another idiot with a stomach bigger than his brain." Naruto frowned and poked her in the side. "What did you say?" "You heard me. I didn't stutter." Temari sipped her coffee as she watched the men around her devour an incredibly large breakfast banquet. It must be a Jinchuriki thing, because Gaara, Naruto, and Kira all had destroyed a table that would have easily fed more than a dozen people. She couldn't imagine where they put it all. Gaara finally sat back in his chair and wiped his mouth with a napkin. The pleasantries were over. It was time for business. "Naruto, I'm glad to see that you've finally begun construction on your house and that you've resumed your duties as a sensei. Sadly, this won't last long. I'm going to need you to go into the field soon. We must stop Akatsuki and end their threat once and for all. This applies to you as well, Kira." The two Jinchuriki looked up from stuffing their faces and swallowed simultaneously. "For starters, I still want to know more about Akatsuki before I do anything with you guys. You've got to have a file I can study or something." And another thing, isn't it dangerous sending both Jinchuriki after them? Gaara sighed and turned his chair to look out the window. It's probably foolish, yes. But there simply aren't many who can go toe-to-toe with Akatsuki and come out on top. You and Naruto are among the few who can. That's why you both have to be there when we go in. Kira noted that Naruto remained silent. He was probably in on the plan already and had helped devise it. What's the plan? Gaara swung the chair back around and folded his arms. We go into Amigakure and find them first. Kira knocked his chair over when he stood up, anger on his face. That's insane. You're talking about going into the belly of the beast. Why in the hell would we attack them on their home turf, when they have ninja around them to help fight and protect them? Kankuro sipped at his coffee and sat the cup down. Because there's no other alternative. Believe me and Temari tried to talk these two out of this. The Hokage did too. But there really is no other alternative. We either strike at them now, or we relegate ourselves to their hit-and-run tactics for the rest of our lives. They've always struck first, not the other way around. They're down to only a few members now. Now is the time to strike. Temari shook her head. No. The time to strike is when we know they're at their weakest. Amigakure is an isolated nation. They have very little trade and are self-sustaining. Because of their isolationism, their population doesn't have much of a boom, seeing as they can't afford to have more people than they can feed. We need to hit their food supply and anything else of value before we attack. Naruto frowned at his girlfriend. I don't like attacking civilians. Cutting off the food supply hurts more than the shinobi. It hurts innocence. Kira reached over and slapped the young man in the back of the head. For a shinobi and a sensei, you're pretty damned naive, Blondie. There are no innocents in Amigakure. They are all part of this little conspiracy, either through active participation or unwillingly. They've allowed Pain and his little troop to take over their country and follow him blindly, like sheep. I've heard stories of their blind devotion. They rush in without thinking, glad to die in the service of their god. The Suna ninja stared at him, curious as to how he knew all that. Naruto voiced their unbidden question. Kira scowled as he spoke. My brother is the Raikage. I know a few things. I suppose I left out that little detail when I gave my backstory, huh? Naruto grimaced and sat forward in his chair. Yeah, you did. What else haven't you told us? Kira snorted and took a bite out of a mango, savoring the taste. Sweet. Yeah, my brother's the Raikage. It's not like we have a great relationship though. He's my brother and I love him. He loves me too. But we don't like each other. I stay up on that mountain unless I'm needed and no one ever comes to visit. He has a couple jounin watching me at all times, but those idiots are incompetent. The only people I've ever had a good relationship with are my students. Naruto quirked an eyebrow and smirked. Students? And you made fun of me? Kira sneered as he took another huge bite of his fruit. My students are masters of the sword due to my training, not snot-nosed little brats in an academy. You can't really compare the two. Naruto growled and sat upright in his seat. My students are more than likely the best prepared children for ninja life in all the elemental countries. I'm teaching more at a time than you besides. Kira sneered and leaned his right elbow on his knee. Well, my students are the best jounin in Kumogakure, besides the Raikage and myself. Gaara's sand suddenly found both of their mouths, clamping down and preventing them from speaking. This isn't a pissing contest over who has the better students. You are both sensei, act like it. We have more important matters to attend to besides. The two Jinchuriki glared at one another before nodding and turning back to face Gaara. Temari glared at Naruto and pinched his side, making him jump. What? He started it. Temari grabbed his ear and jerked it down to her level. I don't care who started it. Stop being disrespectful in front of your Kage. Set an example, sensei. Kira snickered at Naruto's misfortune before Temari cast her gaze on him. I'll deal with you afterwards. He stopped snickering and quirked an eyebrow. I don't believe I'm dating you, Missy. You don't own me. Temari smiled sweetly and let go of Naruto's ear. No, I don't. But, you are a guest of mine, and therefore, I'm responsible for you. Your behavior is reflecting on mine and it's not reflecting very well. Kira shivered under her gaze and turned away. He may not have all that much interaction with women outside of his female students, but he knew when he was treading on dangerous ground. He wasn't about to lie back and take it like Naruto though. I'll keep that in mind. Can we move this along please? Gaara grunted but nodded his approval. Yes, we can. I won't keep you much longer. I have work to do after all. In time, we'll be going back to Konoha to meet with Tsunade and make a definitive plan. We'll move out from there. I need to ask you to return to Kumogakure and ask your Kage to meet us in Konoha. Kira's scowl deepened. He had thought he might be able to escape from Kumo for a bit longer. My brother is an idiot. He believes that Kumo is impenetrable and that I am safe. He did nothing to save Yujito when she was captured. I don't know if his help would be welcomed or not. And besides that, Kumo isn't very well received in Konoha due to the Hyuga incident a few years back. Gaara sighed and stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I know that. But these are different times. We're talking about a threat that will encompass all the elemental countries. It has to be dealt with and, if your brother will not help, he is a fool. Kira nodded his head and stepped over beside Naruto and Temari. I'll speak with him. I promise. I'd like to relax for a bit before I head home though. It's a lot nicer here in Suna than I had heard. Gaara waved them off with his hand as he picked up a report. Thank Naruto for that. Now, if you would all please leave. Kira nudged Naruto on the way out, leaning down to whisper into his ear. Someone needs to get laid. Naruto snickered and bobbed his head in agreement. You have no idea. Kankuro excused himself when they were out of the office, citing that he had drawn patrol duty, yet again, for making Gaara angry about something or other. As he sullenly walked off, Kira clapped his hands together and grinned at the two blondes. So, you're a Meshikari? What's she like? Neither Naruto nor Temari said anything as they led the way back to the property, which annoyed Kira mightily. His face scrunched up as he took a few quick steps ahead so he could see both blondes' faces. Squinting his eyes at Temari, he smirked. If you don't tell me, I'll start rapping again. She tilted her chin upward slightly and he grinned. Oh, I'm bombastic, fantastic fine. Okay. Just, please, keep your mouth shut. Kira grinned at his victory and slowed his walk so he was shoulder to shoulder with Naruto. What's she like? Temari sighed and grasped onto Naruto's fingers as they walked. She hated talking about a former rival of hers for Naruto's affection even if it hadn't been a true rivalry to begin with. Carrie is a very sweet person, very kind. She always tries to help out her students and is very fair with them. I would say she's too nice. Kira nodded his head. He didn't really care about her personality at the moment. He wanted physical details. She's a sweet girl, got it. What does she look like? Temari growled and was about to say something very rude about the male gender, but Naruto poked her in the side and shook his head very slightly. She huffed and stared straight ahead. Naruto turned to Kira with a grin. Carrie is a beautiful girl. She has long, glossy black hair and ruby red lips. Temari squeezed his fingers a bit tighter, but Naruto continued. She's very shapely. Not too big and not too small in all the right places. His knuckles cracked slightly under the pressure. Kira's grin grew wider every moment. She's a capable, competent kunoichi. But what is most attractive about her is that radiant smile she has. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Kira quirked his eyebrow when he heard Temari growl audibly and glanced at Naruto. Surely the guy wasn't that damn oblivious? With no warning, Naruto suddenly turned and latched his arms around Temari, pulling her in for an earth-shaking kiss. She fought at first, trying to twist away before melting into the lip lock. Naruto pulled away with a wet, smacking sound, leaving Temari dazed and happy. He turned back to Kira with a wink. Remember that. It'll help you later. As I was saying, her smile is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen besides Temari. Kira sidled up alongside the blonde, keeping his voice low as Naruto led the still dizzy Temari along by her hand. You're smooth, kid. Real smooth. When am I going to meet her? Naruto's grin widened even more. Right now. Carrie had let her class out a bit early so she could grade some of the tests she had given them. It was somewhat boring without Naruto around and morale had taken a dip. She had taken to letting her class out on a whim every now and then so she could get some things done in the evening. She perked up when she heard familiar voices down the hall and one unfamiliar one. She better be cute, Uzumaki, or I will hurt you. She's cute, damn it. Don't doubt me. Temari, where the hell is Senzoku? He keeps disappearing. I don't know where the hell that overgrown rat gets off to. He's probably with your clone that's teaching the class or sleeping in a tree. Carrie smiled when she heard two of her friends coming and straightened up her pile of paperwork. It could wait till later. She hadn't seen the two lovebirds in quite a while. That thought brought a small sigh to her lips. It could have been her. She turned with a bright smile to the doorway, her grin spreading as Temari walked in first, followed by Naruto. The two waved jovially at her and she returned it. Welcome back, you two. I hope you had fun on your little vacation? Temari sighed, thinking back to all the good times they'd had, a dreamy look crossing her face as she remembered the times that her and Naruto's bodies had entwined. She quickly shook those thoughts away and smiled at Carrie. Yeah. We had a bit of trouble, but we got through it. We have someone we'd like you to meet though. He's a new ally of ours. Carrie, meet Kira. Temari's smile began to wane as Carrie gave her a curious look. I thought I heard a third voice with you guys, but I don't see anyone and it didn't sound like Senzoku. Temari whipped around and glared at the doorway before pushing Naruto. Get that idiot in here. After all that bluster, you mean to tell me he's shy around women? Naruto sighed and poked his head out the door, seeing Kira leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, a pensive look on his face. What the hell are you doing? The sunglasses-clad man looked up with a frown before ducking his head again. What if she doesn't like me? Oh, for the love of Naruto rolled his eyes and grabbed the man by the shoulder, jerking him inside. Kira, caught off balance by the unexpected maneuver, stumbled in and took a knee. He turned his head angrily and began to yell at Naruto. You stupid blonde. What the hell was that for? The sound of giggling caught Kira's ears and he looked up to see Carrie with a blush on her cheeks. He rose quickly, trying to regain some of his lost coolness and bravado. The two looked each other up and down and scrupulously. Carrie's eyes wandered over Kira's sculpted chest and arms, taking in every detail she could. She loved the goatee and the fact that he was tall. She caught a spot of drool with her tongue before it could leak out. Kira let his eyes trace her outline, drinking up the hourglass figure like he was sipping wine. He almost licked his lips at the sight of her full breasts and her round bottom, but caught himself, regaining a bit of his dignity. Hey, I'm Hachi Kira. Temari let out a frustrated sigh and snapped her fingers to get the two's attention. What Kira is trying, and failing miserably, I might add, to say, is that he'd like you to be his date tonight. Me and Naruto, you and Kira, on a double date. What do you say? Carrie nodded her head slowly, never taking her eyes off Kira's face. The giant rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and started to say something else, but Temari pushed both him and Naruto to the door. Good. You two go get ready. I'll take Carrie and we'll meet you at the compound at 7. Naruto, send a clone to make reservations at our favorite restaurant. She looked from Kira to Carrie and clucked her tongue. Had she been this head over heels with Naruto when she'd first gone out with him? Nah, she'd been way more in control. She knew how to make Naruto move along though. She slowly began to reach for her fan and Naruto noticed the movement out of the corner of his eyes. Without warning, he snatched Kira's arm and dragged the man out without saying goodbye. Kira waved as he was dragged out by his collar, cursing loudly when his elbow banged on the frame. Carrie stood for a moment silent before squealing and latching onto Temari's shoulders so the girl couldn't get away, a bright smile alight on her face. Did you see how hot that guy was? He's so muscular. And shy to boot. I bet he's the poetic type, likes to write and dance. Temari snickered and nodded her head. Carrie was partly right. He did love to rhyme and dance, he just wasn't any good at it. She guided the black-haired, giddy woman out of the room and towards the market center of Suna. They'd need some new things for tonight, and it had been a while since she'd wowed Naruto. Naruto didn't stop dragging Kira until he knew he was a safe distance away and stopped, letting the larger man drop into the dust. While Kira was picking himself up, Naruto made a clone and sent it off to make the reservations. The dark-skinned man leapt to his feet, undeterred by his dusty backside, and grabbed Naruto's hand, shaking it up and down. You are a miracle worker. You see that chick, man? She was digging the rap machine. Naruto chuckled and wrenched his hand out of Kira's mighty grip. Yeah, I'm the greatest. I told you she was cute. Cute? Son, she was a bombshell. Dynamite. Out of sight. Baby was tight. Way better looking than any Kumo chickie I've ever seen. Guess if you can't grow plants out here in Suna, you grow good-looking women. What a find. Think she likes me? Considering she was doing everything short of drooling on her shirt checking out your body, I'd say yes. Of course, she doesn't know about your personality quirks yet, but I doubt that would deter her. She's pretty persistent. Now, come on. We've got to get you something to wear this evening. The restaurant is a formal one. Temari likes to dress up when we're out. Kira stopped and looked down at his clothing, before narrowing his eyes at Naruto. What's wrong with the way I look? Naruto put his hands up in placation. Nothing. We just have to dress a bit more formal to get in this restaurant. Standard shinobi clothing really doesn't cut it, you know? Kira nodded slowly while fingering his scarf. He liked his clothes. I'm not taking off the glasses. Fair enough. Naruto and Kira sat on the couch in the den of the compound, waiting for Temari and Carrie to appear. The girls had gotten in earlier than they had, and Temari had told them that they were not to come up the stairs under any circumstances, under pain of death. Naruto had simply agreed and led Kira to a downstairs bathroom where he could shower and change. Naruto winced a bit when his working clothes all dispelled for the evening, informing him that the foundation was complete and that most of the frame was up. A pile of lumber was left beside the house, ready for more work in the morning. He sighed and shook his head. He'd have to commission more nails from the blacksmith tomorrow. Kira noticed the sound and movements from the blonde, but paid him no mind. He was nervous enough about that evening's events and was trying to calm himself. Naruto leaned back and put one arm on the back of the sofa, the other hand to his chin in thought. He wondered what Temari would want for the walls when he got to that stage. Cedar smelled good on the inside for closets. Cypress would be excellent for the outside walls. Pine was prettier for inside walls in rooms and could be stained to several different shades. Of course, oak was good for cabinets. He was suddenly shaken from his thoughts by Kira, who was staring gobsmacked at the entrance. Naruto turned his head and his jaw dropped as well. Temari stood in the teal kimono that accented her so well, a smile on her face as she held Carrie by the shoulders. Carrie herself was clad in a pure white kimono embroidered with blue flowers, her hair pulled up into a bun on top of her head. She had a shy smile on her face, her green eyes showing her anxiousness and anticipation of Kira's thoughts on her dress. Naruto smiled and nudged Kira in the side. Kira was dumbstruck and happy at the same time. He'd never had a woman try to impress him before, and it felt very nice to see that she had put forth effort for him. He grinned and stood up slowly. Carrie's eyes followed his body from the ground up, taking in the finely tailored black pants, on up to the golden coin hanging on a pendant from his neck, to the linen shirt that he had unbuttoned showing a bit of his chest. Her gaze went down to the black jacket held in his arms and then swept upward to his face, which bore a broad smile, and his black sunglasses. Temari and Naruto stood to the side, his arm around her waist and her leaning into his side as they watched the prospective lovebirds entrance each other. Their jaws threatened to unhinge when Kira bent at the waist and brought Carrie's hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles, and bringing a blush to her lips. What majesty the gods hath wrought, what wondrous things untold. The night is young, the future e'er bright, the present surely gold. Temari blinked and looked at Carrie's face. The woman looked as if a fire had alighted itself upon her cheeks as Kira stood upright again, a wry smile on his face. Carrie took her hand back slowly and gave him a shy smile. That was beautiful. Are you a poet? The spoken word is mine to command, like a ship's captain upon the sea. I normally rap, or rhyme as I call it, though most say it does not suit me. Temari finally collected her thoughts and stepped forward with a grin. You should write poetry instead of those stupid raps you always try. You're much better at classical wordplay. Kira frowned a bit and crossed his arms. I like rapping better. Although I'm extremely good with writing poetry, rhyme is rhyme no matter the rhythm it is set to. Perhaps it's merely the fact that the beat in your head doesn't match up to what you want to say, or you just suck at rap. Hello, Carrie-san. While Carrie smiled and waved back at the red panda, Kira growled at the newly appeared Senzoku and kicked out with his foot, missing the summon by mere centimeters. No one asked for your opinion, rat. And where the hell have you been all day? Around. I visited the caves to make sure you hadn't defiled them. You little. Naruto scooped up Senzoku by the nape of his neck and brought him up to eye level. Now, you two. Senzoku, we're going out for the evening. Make sure that nothing happens to the house and that Kankuro doesn't spread his puppets out everywhere when he gets home. We might be out late. Fine. Just make sure he doesn't traumatize Carrie-san. She's too nice to be subjected to his horrible lyrics. Carrie giggled and latched onto Kira's arm to prevent him from strangling the red panda. I happen to like what I've heard so far. His rapping can't be all that bad. Senzoku shrugged as Naruto sat him back down. Your funeral. Don't say I didn't warn you. Temari clapped her hands together and got everyone's attention. Okay, everyone outside. Let's go get something to eat. Dinner went amazingly well, all things considered. Kira didn't try to rap, Carrie was a perfect lady, and Naruto and Temari didn't have to moderate. All in all, it was a successful date. The two couples walked along, chatting with each other on the way back to Carrie's house. Temari's arm was linked with Naruto's and Carrie giggled whenever Kira flexed a muscle. Naruto and Temari were pleasantly surprised by Kira's attitude. They had expected him to be as uncultured and as uncouth at the table as he was in his day-to-day mannerisms. Kira had proven them wrong the whole night long, charming everyone they met with a sharp wit and silver tongue. When Naruto pulled him aside at one point and asked what he was doing, he merely grinned. I'm doing what I do best. Bullshitting. Naruto had blinked and then shrugged, accepting it for what it was. Kira was really good at bullshitting with other people. The night came to a close, though, and they stopped in front of Carrie's house to drop her off. Kira walked her to her door and they awkwardly stood there, illuminated by the moonlight, for several minutes. Carrie finally sighed and looked up at the bright, round moon. Alas, the night is waning now, the evening over, the moon so high. Part ways we must, the poet and lady, but ne'er shall I cry. For the morning sun a new day brings, and possibilities will abound. Come find me on the morrow, O poet sir, the school is where I'm found. She pulled on his collar, bringing him down enough so that she could place a chaste kiss on his cheek, before releasing him. Let's do lunch. Good night, Hachi Kira. Kira watched with wide eyes behind his glasses as the door shut and made his way back over to the two blondes, a broad smile on his face. Temari and Naruto waited for him to stand beside them before walking again. Naruto cleared his throat and cut his eyes to the larger man. So? Kira grinned and looked up at the moon. She's a poet too. I think I'm in love, Temari snorted and tightened her hold on Naruto. You'd better have a couple more dates before you fall head over heels, lover boy. You're going back to Kumo, you know? Kira sighed and his head dipped a little bit. Yeah, but it'll be fun until then, at least. Besides, it's not just me who should enjoy the days ahead. It's going to get dangerous for us all. The rest of the walk was filled with silence, all three contemplating their next course of action and the future. 2 weeks later, Kira left Suna and made his way back to Kumo to talk with his brother. Naruto heard him mumble something about taking his punishment, but blew it off as the ramblings of a man upset at having his vacation cut short. He chuckled as Kira took off across the desert, wrapped up like a mummy, his cursing of the sun and the heat wafting back over the sand. Naruto turned back to the village and made his way to Gaara's office. He spoke with Gaara about when they would go to Konoha to have the talks with Tsunade about the invasion and left shortly afterwards. He was almost finished with the exterior of the house and was about to start on the interior, but he wanted Temari's input. After all, she'd be there just as much as him. He stood still, watching as his clones finished the last touches on the outside of the house, fitting the glass for the windows, sealing up any cracks between the boards, and making sure there were no weak points in any of the structure. He flopped to the ground beneath a tree and held his chin in his hands. The clones all padded up to him and formed rows while one saluted. Exterior of Manor Uzumaki, completed, boss. What do we need to do next? Naruto glanced up by cocking his head and clicked his tongue. Well, you guys went and bought enough wiring and piping yesterday, right? A resounding hi permeated the clearing. Good. Then some of you get started on the wiring. The rest of you plumb the house. Make sure you use the appropriate size for sewer pipes. One of the clones snickered. Come on, boss. Surely you can't drop a log that would stop up some small piping. Naruto glared at the clone and it was suddenly wrapped in thorny vines, yelling in pain before it exploding in smoke. The other clones gulped and turned back to the original. Anybody else want to be a smartass? Every blonde head shook vehemently no. Good. Get to work. I want this thing wired and plumbed by nightfall. The clones scrambled off towards the house, eager to get away from their disgruntled creator. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes, only to feel two familiar arms wind around his shoulders. Isn't arguing with yourself the sign of a sick mind? Naruto leaned back into the embrace, but kept his eyes closed. Everyone knows I'm crazy, so it's okay. Besides, I punish myself when I get out of line. Temari leaned against his back and nuzzled into his hair, the warm morning sun and the shade of the tree they were under making it difficult to keep her eyes open. There are so many layers to that it would make a psychiatrist cry, Naruto. How long until you finish the house? Naruto pulled her around to the front and leaned back against the trunk of the tree. Temari settled in between his legs and laid against his chest, the soft rhythm of his heart lulling her to sleep. It won't be long now. The clones are going to start working on the wiring and the plumbing today. Should be finished by this evening. Naruto looked down at her, smirking as her head began to dip and roll. I need your help with the interior though. I have no idea what you'd like. Temari's foggy brain seemed to latch onto that single statement and she rolled her head back to look up at him. You mean I get to pick the inside? Naruto nodded and winced at the squeal. Temari wriggled in glee in his arms, fidgeting like a child on a sugar high. Oh, this is so exciting. I've got to pick paints, furniture, flooring. I'm going to need Carrie's help with this. Naruto tightened his grip on the wiggling girl and lowered his head to whisper in her ear. I take it you've never done this before? Are you kidding? The compound has always been the way it is. The furniture has always been there, it's always been the same color, and we can't take or bring in anything new besides tools and clothes. I get to pick out the color for my room, right? Naruto snorted and pulled her back against him again. You can choose whatever you like, Temari. I'm not one much for interior design, so I'm leaving that to you. But my study is mine to do with as I please. The rest is all you just don't go overboard. He leaned back and closed his eyes, listening to Temari's giggles become quieter and quieter until she fell asleep. Soon enough, times like these would be totally gone unless Akatsuki was defeated. If that could be accomplished, then their world could have peace. As much peace as ninja villages could have anyway. The question was how many would have to die to achieve that? Temari threw herself into decorating the house. She absolutely loved the outside. Naruto had used every natural resource he could to make an appealing look. The walls of the house were cypress, known for its ability to resist moisture and weathering. The roof was red, baked tile that had been formed by Naruto himself and carefully placed. The only thing that bothered her was that the landscape around the house was still bare. Carrie had been most helpful with picking out complementing colors for the walls and several knickknacks to accent everything. Naruto had merely shook his head and told them to have fun while he went about his business. He had other things to occupy himself with while Temari went nuts. The first thing Temari tackled was the entranceway. To her, it made sense to work her way inward to the rest of the house. Several of Naruto's clones trailed behind her to do heavy lifting or fetch things for her when she called for them. The first task she put them to was laying tile in the entranceway. Naruto had carved a 6x6 area that was 4 inches lower than the rest of the house by the front door as the official shoe removal area. The threshold was lower than the sunken area so that any dirt could be easily swept out. It was soon decided that the tile was to be spread throughout the entire house, the Narutos laying the mortar and quickly slapping the tile into place in the living room. They'd return the next day and grout the tile before moving on to the next room. Temari continued on into her study and stood at the doorway, a finger to her chin. She wasn't one much for many books or scrolls, being a frugal girl, but she did have many things she wanted to display. With a snap of her fingers, 2 Narutos ambled over and waited for instruction. She told one of them to go to the compound and retrieve all of her special things. While it ran off, she told the other one to paint the room in a teal color to match her eyes. It saluted and went to find a paintbrush. A squeal from the living room let her know that Carrie had finally arrived. Temari poked her head around the corner and saw Kira behind her. "Carrie, come on in." "Kira, go somewhere else. I don't want you in here." He scowled and started to say something, but Temari's glare made him think twice. He grunted and turned to Carrie. "I'll be at the caves if you need me. I need to clear my head." Carrie narrowed her eyes at Temari, who waved her off. "Don't look at me like that. Now come on. We've got work to do." Carrie quirked an eyebrow as she watched the Narutos laying down the tile, having gotten into a pattern finally. "What work? It looks like he's doing all the work." "Nah. We've got all the hard work. You know, picking out everything and making sure it matches. He's just the dumb muscle. Come on, we've got a lot to do." 1 week later, with the moon lighting their way, 2 blondes stood outside a completed home, large smiles on their faces. This was it. They stood on the precipice of walking into their home. Their home. No one but them. It was nothing new to Naruto, having lived alone all his life, but this was his. It was something he'd built with his own 2 hands, something that was uniquely him. Temari just stood in awe. She had her own home, with someone that she loved. Oh, she loved the compound, but it was all tradition and history. Here, in this house, they would make their own traditions. Their own history. Naruto took a deep breath and turned to face Temari, gripping her hand tighter. The smile on his face could almost light up the night sky. "Well, shall we?" She nodded and they strode up to the heavy, oaken door. Naruto slid the key inside the lock and turned it, the loud clack filling the still night air. He pushed the door open and flipped the light on. The entryway brightened up and they stepped into the alcove and removed their shoes, placing them on the cedar rack beside the door. Temari wriggled her toes on the cold tile floor and grinned. Time to take it all in. They left the entrance and stopped under the archway that led to the living room. Naruto groped around with his right hand for the switch and finally found it, bathing the house in luminescence. They had both seen it at different times, having worked on it, but to see it in completion was so truly wonderful. The beige tile that lay upon the floor seemed to sparkle as the light poured down on it. Temari took in everything that she had done: the walls that were painted a light brown, the mirrors that hung on the wall, the paintings, and the comfortable leather furniture. She turned her head to see Naruto nodding approvingly to the room. She grinned and pulled him along. "Come on, there's more to see." Indeed there was. The kitchen was a near replica of his parents' kitchen, down to the cabinets and the countertops. He had so loved the layout of that simple little room where meals would have been lovingly crafted. Temari ran her fingers over the smooth marble and opened the fridge. Hopefully, he was up for cooking tonight. They continued along the rest of the rooms, which were only a couple of empty bedrooms. They both knew what they were for, but neither wanted to broach that subject at the moment. Temari came to a red door and grinned to herself. This was her study. She swung the door open and flicked on the switch. It was a comfortable room, with 2 plush chairs in the middle, facing each other. A large handwoven rug rested beneath the two. Her weapons and assorted ninja paraphernalia that she had acquired over the years adorned the walls. She watched as Naruto crossed the room and fingered an especially large fan. It had belonged to her grandmother and was for looks only, not for battle. It was entirely too delicate for the rigor that war demanded, but it was a beautiful thing to behold. She sat down in one of the chairs, drinking in the peaceful atmosphere, and sighed. It was hers and it calmed her. Naruto strolled over to a rack of scrolls and ran his hands across them. They were ancient and more than likely family heirlooms. He smiled at several photos of the two of them together and several of her family. He stopped at a picture of a young woman holding a baby boy, with a giggling Temari in her lap. He turned to her and gave her a small, sad smile. "Your mother?" She nodded. He bobbed his head once and turned back around, his hands behind his back. "She's beautiful. I can see where you got it from." She said nothing as he wandered around the rest of the room, checking out her oaken desk and flopping down into her plush office chair, bouncing a few times. He looked back over to see her holding a photo of her family, a wistful look in her eyes. He couldn't stand to see her like this, when this was a happy time for both of them. He walked over to her and bumped her arm, pulling her up. "Let's go see mine now, and then we'll look at our 2 most important rooms." Temari smirked and let him lead her. There were 3 rooms that she was not allowed to deal with. The master bedroom, the master bathroom, and Naruto's study had been off limits. He said he wanted to surprise her. She had no doubt he would. He led her down the hall, her hands sliding along the lacquered wainscoting, before stopping at a green door. Somehow, she had known that was what the color would be. She shot him a look and put her hands on her hips. "Well? Let's see it." He slowly slid the door open and ushered her inside. Temari, despite how proud she was of her own comfortable study, was in awe of Naruto's own. He had used his powers to virtually make his study into a greenhouse. Every inch was covered with some amount of greenery and one wall was nothing but glass doors that could open to the outside. The chairs were giant roots that he had carved out and put seat cushions in, and even the tables were carved from roots. He pointed up and she gasped. The entire ceiling was glass, and she could see the beautiful moon beaming down through the panes. The walls, where they weren't leafy green, were adorned with his own ninja paraphernalia, and he had carved several nooks into the trunk of a tree. She wandered around through the room, stopping at a certain corner, a smile on her face. "Gardenias. I love these flowers." "I know. Their smell reminds me of you." She wrapped her arms around him with a wry smile, kissing him deeply as she did. Naruto held on to her hips with both hands and slowly pushed her away. Temari whined at the lack of contact. Now, don't pout. We still have the whole night to play. We still have a couple more rooms to go." She smirked and latched her hand onto his, dragging him out of the room with a glance back. "You realize I'm going to spend a lot of time in here, right?" He nodded his head and let her lead. "I know. That's one reason I put the gardenias in there." She smiled fondly and led the way to the last door in the house. Beyond that simple slab of wood was her new hideaway, her new comfort zone, their bedroom. She stopped before it and put her hand on the door, her eyes closed. She heard Naruto chuckle behind her. "Forget how to open a door?" She growled playfully, but didn't turn around. "No, asshole. I'm savoring the moment. Something you usually don't take the time to do." She opened her eyes when he put one hand on her shoulder and the other reached around her to open the door, turning the knob with a click. Moments are meant to be savored because they're moments, not long minutes. Savor the door later. The ponytailed blonde was about to retort when she was pushed roughly into the room and the door was shut behind them, the thud of the door shutting echoing through the pitch black. Temari bent low, crouched on her toes, waiting for whatever Naruto had planned. This was a game they'd never played before and it was exciting. She sent her chakra to her ears so she could hear the slightest movement in the room. "Oh, Naruto. Where are you, honey?" She gasped when a hand smacked her bottom and whipped around, but he was gone again. She backed against the wall and flattened out. "This isn't fair, you know. You have better night vision than I do." Hot breath tickled her ear and she shivered. "It's not about fair or unfair. It's about how much fun you have. Are you having fun?" Temari sucked in a breath, trying to keep herself calm. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Yes." The light blinded her as it flashed into existence and she covered her eyes in instinct, blinking away the spots, before lowering her arms. Naruto stood beside her with a hand on his hip and the other on the switch. His broad grin seemed to light up the room more. He pulled her into a kiss and then whipped her around to face the room. "Well? Thoughts?" Temari stared wide-eyed at their bedroom. Naruto had painstakingly crafted what to her was the loveliest room she'd ever seen. And the best part was that she would get to stay in it whenever she was home. The walls were a cream color, the floor a brown, earthy tone, covered with plush rugs so that her feet would not be cold in the mornings. Vines crawled the walls in intricate detail, looking as if they'd been painted on, and wound around many pictures. Her eyes cut from one photo to the other. It was like looking at a timeline of their lives. It started with a photo of her parents when they were young and her father was not yet a total asshole or her mother a vindictive bitch. The next was the painting of Naruto's parents, lovingly holding onto each other as if each was the other's lifeline. She smiled as she gazed upon it. Kushina must have been just a few months pregnant when it was made, her belly just starting to show. Naruto stood behind Temari, his hands on her shoulders as she slowly spun in place, looking at the timeline he'd made. She continued on, looking at the photos one by one. Her, when she was a toddler. Naruto, with the Hokage's hat on his head. Temari and Kankuro standing side by side. Naruto, swinging on that lonesome swing. Her siblings and Baki. Team 7. Her battle armor. Naruto and Gamakichi. Her and Shikamaru. Naruto and Sakura. Gaara and her and Kankuro, after his resurrection. Naruto, the day he strolled into Suna to become a citizen. The photos were so painstakingly arranged that she felt she could reach out and touch the memories. She felt Naruto's arms encircle her and leaned back into his embrace as she finished scanning the photos. His first night at the compound. His first day of school. Their first date. Their first photographed kiss. On vacation in Konoha. She blinked when she realized that one wall was left blank and leaned her head back to look into his eyes. "Why's that wall blank?" He leaned down and captured her lips before leaning back up. "That wall is for the future, for the memories that we will make together in this house. That wall is ours." She smiled and looked around the room again. A massive 4-post bed was against the wall, right by a window to let in the air, the canopy encircling it rippling in the small breeze. 2 large dressers stood side by side, one his, the other hers. He had decided he didn't want closets, opting instead for 2 huge armoires on either side of a door at the far end of the room. A fireplace with 2 leather chairs were the other things filling up the room. She snickered to herself. While desert nights were indeed cold, they didn't really need a fireplace. It was a nice touch though. She suddenly felt herself being led towards that lone door at the back of the room. Their bedroom was beautiful. She couldn't imagine what he'd done with the bathroom, her favorite place in the compound. Since baths were relatively a luxury in Suna, she loved their bathroom at her ancestral home. But with water relatively underneath them on their land, she could have a bath whenever. The world suddenly became black as Naruto covered her eyes with his hands. "Wouldn't want to spoil the surprise now, would we? I want you to feel it before you see it." Temari sighed and let him lead her in, one awkward step at a time. She groped for the doorway and turned the handle, listening to Naruto as his words told her where to go. She found the light switch to the right of the door and flipped it to the on position so she could see when he took his hands away from her eyes. The wall was cool and smooth, with lines running up and down and sideways. The floor was the same way. She could only assume it was all tile, even the ceiling. Her knees knocked into something cold, and when she put her hand down to feel it, she touched water. She heard Naruto grunt in humor behind her and scowled when she realized she had dipped her hand into the toilet. She pulled the appendage out and reached back, wiping it on his clothes. Temari grinned and fell to the left of the tub, hitting nothing but air. She growled and grabbed Naruto's hands. Enough of this. I can't stand it any longer. She slapped Naruto's hands away and gasped when she saw the bathroom. She didn't know where he'd gotten the stone, but it was breathtaking. The floor was dark and faded as it pulled out to the walls, getting lighter and lighter until it meshed with a white ceiling. A large tub was built into the floor with a shower in the corner. The toilet she had stuck her hand in sat off to one side, besides a square sink. She could only imagine the amount of plumbing he had to do. She twirled around and walked to the shower, admiring the smoothness of the stones and the polished brass faucet. She stiffened when she heard water running behind her and saw Naruto dipping his hand into the tub. Seems the water heater works. Want to take a bath together? It's been a while since we did that. Temari smirked and untied the sash around her waist, letting the large red ribbon fall to the ground. Naruto watched as she slowly opened her robe, exposing her red lace bra and panties. Her smirk widened as she walked past him, her fingers trailing across his chest as she stepped into the tub and sank onto a seat at the far end. It hadn't looked that big without being filled, but it was actually quite large. She crooked her finger, beckoning him to come. Sweetie, this tub is so lonely without you. So big and empty. Why don't you get in? We'll see whether or not you can unhook a bra underwater. He nearly broke his leg trying to get out of his pants. Their first night in their new house was spent making love and eventually collapsing onto the huge bed, happy, content, and most importantly, more in love than when they started. 2 weeks passed in which Gaara and Kankuro visited to see the new residents, both genuinely impressed. Sanzoku had snuck in at some point during that first night and claimed one of the empty rooms as his. Temari had nearly had a heart attack when she woke up and heard a snore coming from a supposedly empty room, only to open the door and find a sleeping Sanzoku the size of a horse. She opted instead to quietly shut the door, walk back down the hall, and crawl back in bed with Naruto, hugging up against his back. He groggily turned around and wrapped his arms around her. What's matter? I saw a Sanzoku the size of a horse. He see and chain si, she had snorted at his sleepy mumbling and went back to sleep. His warmth was intoxicating, something that never ceased to amaze her. She had drifted back off to sleep that first morning and hadn't woken up until noon. But that was 2 weeks ago. This morning was not nearly so serene since she'd gotten word that they were to return to Konoha with a contingent of Suna ninja, Gaara, and Kankuro among them. She and Naruto sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and eating toast. Sanzoku sat nearby on his haunches, nibbling at a piece of fruit. Her mug was halfway to her mouth when Naruto sighed and locked eyes with her. I don't want to do this. We've just started here. What if something happens? Temari slowly sat her coffee mug down and looked into it, the murky liquid casting her solemn look back at her. I don't want to either. I keep running things over in my mind, things that could happen and things I don't want to happen. I don't want to lose you, not now. I don't want to lose you either. And neither of you shall, if we have anything to say about it. The two blondes looked up to find Gaara and Kankuro standing in the doorway with smiles on their faces. What we're going to do hasn't ever been done since the days of Hanzo. Don't worry. We're going to Konoha to lay out a plan. That idiot Kira and his brother will be there as well. When you see the wreckage, you'll understand why there is little to worry about. Temari scoffed and stood up, straightening out her robe. If he's anything like Kira, then we have everything to worry about. Gaara fixed her with an even stare and then looked at Kankuro. Do you and I act anything alike, at all? Kankuro quirked an eyebrow and smirked. Of course not. I can't always be moody like you. Gaara ignored the jab and turned back to the blondes. There's your answer. Now get dressed, we leave in 2 hours. He walked out the door, motioning for Kankuro to follow. Puppet Master stopped at the door and looked back. Dude, when are you going to cook for us here? How about dinner when we get back? Gaara's gruff voice floated around the corner. Kankuro, let's go. Temari sighed and picked up their mugs, depositing them in the sink, before walking to their bedroom. Come on. We might as well get this over with. 5 days later, the Suna contingency arrived at Konoha and were immediately ushered into a meeting room within the Hokage Tower. Tsunade and her advisors were there, as well as several key ninja, to whatever they were going to plan. The ninja of the 2 villages milled around, talking to one another, when Temari suddenly winced and buried her face in her hands. Naruto heard Senzoku growl and asked the 2 what their problem was. He's here. Naruto was about to ask whom she meant when he heard a familiar booming voice. Hachikira, in the place, going too fast, you can't keep pace. My rhymes are slick, they flow so true, who's happy to see the killer be come through? The doors were flung open and there stood Hachikira, with a group of embarrassed-looking people behind him. 3 in particular looked ashamed while one particularly huge man reached out and grabbed the Jinchuriki by the shoulder, growling at him in a deep voice. Kira, I would advise you to keep your voice down while here. The hand was shrugged off and Kira looked around the room, quickly locating his 2 favorite people of Suna besides Kari. Naruto. Temari. Throw rug. My name is Senzoku, you fruitcake. A loud clap came from the front and everyone turned to see the 3 Kages standing behind a table. Tsunade bid them all sit and leaned against the table, her palms flat on the surface. We're here to discuss Akatsuki and a possible alliance between our 3 villages against them. With us today are ninja of Konoha, Suna, and Kumo, as well as the Kage of all 3 villages. I call this summit to order. Chapter 25. Now then, I, Senju Tsunade, Hokage of Konohagakure, would like to welcome our allies to this summit. We are here to formulate a plan to rid ourselves of the menace of the Akatsuki. I'd like to ask the other Kage to stand and give a bit of information about their greatest assets, so that we can better formulate a plan. The Raikage, a giant man who was as tall as Tsunade when he was sitting down, folded his arms and spoke in a booming voice. I believe it would be best for our host to go first. Let us know what cards you hold. Tsunade nodded her head and clasped her hands together, her mouth hidden behind them. Very well. I have several high-profile ninja under my rule. I believe you know most of them, so I won't mention names. All of the ninja are highly skilled and will definitely be an asset to our cause. The Raikage nodded and leaned back a bit further in his chair, getting comfortable. How about some names for reassurance? Very well. We have elite ninja such as Hatake Kakashi, Mado Gai, my apprentice Shizune, Mitarashi Anko, Shiranui Genma, and all their students. I believe you can match up who taught who. Now, Raikage Dono? The large man grunted and rose from his seat, his imposing figure casting a shadow over all in the room. My ninja may not be as numerous as yours, Hokage Dono, but we are all just as powerful as your most elite. My size may speak for my strength, but it does not belie my skills. I prefer taijutsu to all other forms of battle. Sadly, one of our former elite kunoichi, Miyujito, is no longer with us. She was the Jinchuriki for the Nibi and was captured by the Akatsuki. She would have been invaluable in this venture. The large man took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He knew what would happen as soon as he opened his mouth. My brother Hachikira, baby. Recognize. The Raikage sighed and continued his speech. Is the Jinchuriki for the Hachibi. He can communicate with his demon and has a somewhat amicable rapport with it. Beyond what his demon can do for him, he is the most accomplished swordsman that Kumogakure has ever seen. His students, also some of the best swordsmen to come out of Kumo, are Karui, Omoi, and Samui. Trust me when I say that their skill speaks better than any words. Murmurs were heard throughout the room as the named ninja stood and bowed to the room, their blades clearly evident upon their backs. The Raikage bade them sit and turned to Gaara. I believe that it is Kazekage Dano's turn to show his hand. Gaara snorted and rose from his chair. The crowd was silent as he gazed out over them. My hand is filled with nothing but aces, Raikage Dano, as is yours. We can't risk any normal ninja on this mission. Only the best will suffice. My siblings, Temari and Kankuro, and I will be along for the ride. I'm quite sure all of you know what we are capable of. Our former sensei, Baki, is adept with wind. And then there is my friend, Uzumaki Naruto. All of the Kumo ninja turned their heads to better see the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, while the Konoha nin's faces screwed up at the mention of Uzumaki, like something had left a bad taste in their mouths. Naruto tilted his chin up slightly as he stood with the rest of the Suna ninja. Naruto is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, holder of the Raccoon tribe contract, and master of an ancient power called the Green. He and Kira are what the Akatsuki want. This plan is risky, but we are all tired of being on the defensive. We need to hit them first for once. We need a plan that is near foolproof. Everyone nodded and murmurs went through the room again as Gaara sat back down. Tsunade took that as a chance to regain the floor. The plan is somewhat simple. We go into Amigakure and draw out the Akatsuki. Naruto and Kira will go in first and hit the city hard. When Akatsuki notice that the two of them are leading an assault, they should come running. It's too dangerous to send those two in first. What if we don't react soon enough? Tsunade turned to look at the Raikage. We'll be right behind them. As soon as they make their first move, we'll move in and begin to dismantle the city. If we can find their hideout and destroy it, all the better. Even if we don't get rid of the Akatsuki this time, we will put a dent in their plans. This is what we want to do. Gaara crossed his arms and sighed. We need to take them down in one fell swoop. Hit-and-run tactics will not work against ninja strong enough to take down countries by themselves. Tsunade smirked and swept her hand out over the crowd of ninja. Any of these assembled ninja could invade a country. The only thing that would stop them is another elite ninja. That's what our plan should count on. We have enough elites to match up to the Akatsuki. Besides, I doubt Kisame is fully healed from when Naruto poisoned him, if he survived at all. That makes their forces weaker. The Raikage gritted his teeth. What about the ninja of Amigakure? What do we do about them? If they resist, we destroy them. That is what we will do about them. Gaara leaned forward in his chair. So we are talking about a full-scale decimation of a nation. Tsunade nodded her head. Yes. We can't afford to assume that everyone is innocent that we come across. If they resist, kill them. Our strike must be swift and without mercy. Kira, in a moment of rare seriousness, stood from his seat. The ninja of AIM are devoted to pain fully and with utter loyalty. It's an almost fanatical devotion. To them, he is a god. He beat Salamander Hanzo, someone that even the Sannin could not beat in their prime. These people are not innocent. AIM is like a cult. Tsunade blinked and nodded her head. What do you suggest we do? Same thing you do with any cult. You have to eradicate it if you don't want its members coming back for revenge. Let Naruto and I go in first. We'll get the ball rolling. This plan is insane and there is truly no way to plan for anything. We don't know who will come from where or which Akatsuki will engage us. For that matter, who's left? Kisame, Madara, Pain, Zetsu, Konan, and Itachi. Kira hummed to himself, but soon shrugged. Well, any Uchiha is going to be a problem in any event. The rest, well, like I've said, it doesn't pay to be prepared because we don't know who's going to be fighting who. Before Naruto could throw a barb back, Tsunade slapped her hand on the desk. Back to the matter at hand. Yes, it's true that we don't know who will be fighting who. Jiraiya has already fought Pain once. He's extremely difficult to fight and with his bodies, it just adds to the level of opponents that we'll be facing. Madara is the big question mark. We don't know what he can or would do. He's not happy with Naruto after he killed Uchiha Sasuke, so he would probably make it a point to go for him. Naruto nodded his head and leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs at the ankles. Yeah, Itachi wasn't happy to cut our fight short last time either. You never know what he'll do. If Kisame is alive, he's going to be pissed at me too. I don't know anything about Zetsu or Konan. Jiraiya kicked off from his position on the wall, everyone turning to listen when his geta clopped on the floor. Konan and Zetsu are different. Both are more suited to espionage than actual fighting. That's not saying they can't hold their own in a fight though. Konan can turn her entire body into paper, sending individual parts to go accomplish separate tasks. Zetsu can somehow move through surfaces at will. It's not like the headhunter jutsu. He actually moves through the ground without disturbing anything. The Raikage chair creaked as he leaned against the table. Perhaps we Kage should take on Madara? That frees everyone else up for the others. Gaara shook his head. There is still Itachi and the rest. Pain himself is a small army. Jiraiya was able to stand up to 3 of the Pains last time. But he couldn't take on all 6. Tsunade's eyes were closed as she thought. No strategy seemed to be sound. What if I assign some of my elites to track down Pain on the battlefield? Jiraiya, you said that each one shares a field of vision with the others, correct? Yes. Then the ideal thing to do would be to separate the bodies so that they can't help each other. If at least 3 ninja take on one body, we should be able to incapacitate them. These bodies must be destroyed completely. Jiraiya thought he killed 3 of them, but they easily came back to life. Hack their limbs off, do whatever you have to do. All heads in the room nodded and Tsunade smiled. There was one strategy down. The Raikage was not a patient man when it came to planning though. What about Madara? Naruto flinched slightly as he spoke to the Raikage. Madara was a sore spot for him. He has the weird ability to make his body intangible. An attack on him would have to be an utter and complete surprise. He would have to be caught totally unaware. That's the problem with him. The Raikage grunted. We can do that. With 3 of us, it should be a matter of wearing him down. Kakashi had been silent the entire time, not even reading his book, but he couldn't keep silent any longer. Guy and I will take Itachi. We have the most experience fighting a Sharingan besides Naruto. Tsunade smirked. And the other 3 members? Kakashi shrugged. Why not let everyone else have a shot? Kamui, one of the female students of Kira, raised her hand. We would like to have a shot at Kisame. We're swordsmen after all. Kiba's hand shot into the air. Teammate wants Zetsu. With our abilities, he shouldn't be able to hide from us for long. Temari slowly raised her hand. I guess Kankuro and I could take on Konan. If she turns into paper, I could always just scatter her into bits. Kankuro nodded and Tsunade smiled. Well, that's all the major players. Let's lay out a bit more. I want everyone who spoke up to have more backups. Shikamaru, get your lazy ass up here and help us strategize. A week later, 2 figures sat atop a tower in Amigakure, looking out over the city. Both were thinking about how this could be their last day on Earth, contemplating over everything that they had wanted to accomplish, but may never happen. Hachikira and Uzumaki Naruto were gathering their thoughts. Hey, kid? Yeah? You ever wonder what we did in a past life to deserve this? Were we just that bad or were we righteous and the kami decided that we needed to be tested? Naruto sighed and watched as the people below went about their business. I think that we were chosen because the kami has a funny sense of humor. We're all relatives or children of Kage. We're practically royalty in the ninja world. Yet, we're scorned and hated. He turned to Kira and smiled. That makes us stronger people. It makes us better people. I only have to look at the pettiness that I put up with as a child to realize that I'm better than the rest of them. Pain thinks that his childhood was rough. He was an orphan in a war-torn country. Big deal. There were plenty of orphans then. I'm an orphan. But I don't call myself God and run around trying to burn the world to ashes. Yeah, he has a weird complex. Maybe he's compensating for something? Naruto snickered. Maybe. That's why he needs 6 of them. Kira snorted. I bet he's a Minuteman too. Naruto's cheeks puffed out from holding in his laughter. Yeah, but you know what they say, don't you? Kira shook his head, the grin on his face evident. Naruto took a deep breath. Even something only 2 inches long can hurt someone if it's coming in at 200 miles an hour. Kira let out a barking laughter and slapped his knee. The two sat there chuckling for a moment before both sighed and rose to their feet. Kira rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck while Naruto held his hand out and his staff burst from the wooden shingled roof. Kira quirked an eyebrow. I'll never get used to that. You ready, kid? Yeah, ready as I'll ever be. How do you want to start this? Kira sucked in a quick breath. You use that power of yours and try to break that tower in the middle of the city in half. Then summon Tsubasa and run rampant. Destroy as much as you can. Did you tell Temari goodbye? No. It would have felt like I wasn't coming back. We kind of avoided each other before this. That wasn't good, kid. You shouldn't avoid things like that. She'll be pissed if you die and vice versa. What about you and Carrie? That's none of your concern. The two stared at each other before Naruto spoke. So what are you going to do to start this off? Kira grinned and turned his head to Naruto, his face already peeling. Me? Well, I'm letting the Hachibi out to play. Good luck, Uzumaki Naruto. If we make it out of this alive, I'll sing you a song. How about we just get a drink? Kira nodded and held out his hand, the flesh on his arm already peeling away. Naruto grasped it and the two gave each other a firm shake. Kira let go and backpedaled to the edge of the building. He held his arms out to the side and teetered back and forth. See you on the flip side, flower boy. With that he fell over the edge. Within moments a large boom sounded and the roar of the Hachibi echoed throughout Amigakure. Naruto concentrated on the tower in the middle and it shattered as 2 large redwoods burst from underneath it, tearing it in half. Without delay, he shoved the staff into the ground and ran through the seals for the summoning. He had left Sanzoku with Temari, as he'd be more help to her than to him. A large burst came forth and Naruto was standing on Tsubasa's nose, the building he'd been standing on crushed beneath him. Naruto, I assume this is important? Sure is. We're invading Amigakure. Tsubasa nodded his massive head and crossed his eyes so he could better see the boy. Total destruction then? Whatever you want to do, do it. Excellent. Well, I'm off to cause mayhem then. Call me if you need help. Naruto shouted his thanks and Tsubasa wandered off into the city, swinging his tail and taking out buildings. Naruto leapt off the rubble he had been standing on and began making his way into the city. Tsunade and the others watched from a few miles away as Tsubasa and the Hachibi seemed to be having a contest of who could cause the most destruction. Currently, the Hachibi was winning by swinging its tails in all directions. Tsunade looked at the other Kage and nodded her head. Well, I guess that's the signal. Remember, try not to engage any of the Akatsuki alone. And always keep your comrades in view. To victory! To victory! And the mass of people ran toward Amigakure. Several patrols that were outside the city were wiped out by the advancing troops of 3 major villages. Tsunade and the Raikage drew their fists back as they approached the gates of the village and knocked them down with a mighty blow from each Kage. The ninja of the allied villages scattered into groups as they entered the city, each going to seek out the Akatsuki. Pain and Madara were talking of their next move when they felt the first few explosions rock their city. Pain looked out the window to see the Hachibi and Tsubasa wreaking havoc. So they have finally come. I did not expect the Hachibi to be with them. This just makes everything easier. Madara grabbed Pain's arm before he could leave. Do not underestimate the Kyubi Jinchuriki. He's more than he seems. Yes, the plant life. I shall take care of him. They are sure to have more than just the 2 of them. Take care of the other forces first. As you wish, Madara-sama. Conan was checking up on Kisame when the explosions rocked the tower they were in and part of it crumbled away. She was just about to see what the matter was when Zetsu appeared from the ceiling. The Kyubi brat has arrived with the Hachibi. They are destroying the village. Madara-sama says now is the time to act. Conan nodded and made her way out the door. Zetsu turned to Kisame, who still lay on the bed, and grinned eerily. I wonder if you taste as good as shark fin soup. Surely your flesh would be delicious. Kisame bared his teeth and reached for Samahata. Try it, freak. Zetsu laughed and sank back into the ceiling. Kisame lay back against the headboard for a moment before lurching to his feet and grabbing his cloak. He buttoned it up swiftly and swung Samahata to his back. His breathing was still labored, but he would manage. As he walked out the door, he grinned. He had a score to settle. Temari cracked another ninja's skull open with her fan as she made her way down the streets. These people were fanatical, just as Kira had said. They came to battle screaming about serving Pain-sama and how it was an honor to die in his service. She saw a glimpse of Tsubasa's tail as it crushed another building and wondered how Naruto was doing. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw a ninja running at her with a dagger, but she wouldn't be able to turn in time to block. She braced for impact, trying to turn so it wouldn't be lethal, when a large red blur the size of an elephant tackled the ninja and tore his head off. Sanzoku shook himself to get rid of the dust and waddled over to Temari. Watch your back, damn it. I can't be there all the time. Stupid rat. If I didn't have to watch your back all the time, I could watch my own. You're welcome, bitch. Temari blew another ninja away with a gust from her fan and kept walking. Fuck you. I said, you're welcome, bitch. Fuck you. The thanks I get ungrateful, you two need to be quiet. It's hard to sneak around when you're both that loud. Shut up, Kankuro. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Gaara each struck down another ninja before the cries of several of their own made them turn to face a side street. Holding a Sunanin by the neck was none other than the god realm Pain. Hello again, Jiraiya-sensei. It is quite an honor. No one has ever had the privilege of being my enemy and seeing my face twice. No one but you. Jiraiya made little of the comment, keeping himself on guard. Where are the other Pains? We are here. We are watching. Pain will come to all of you. This world must be cleansed. Gaara and Tsunade were on edge as one by one the other Pains appeared. Tsunade cast a careful eye to Jiraiya and found him stony-faced. The white-haired Sanin took 2 steps back and spoke quietly to the two. Have all our available people, including you two, dogpile the Pains. Keep them occupied for a few moments. Tsunade started to protest, but he silenced her. No, Haim. Just do as I say. Without another word, Tsunade, Gaara, and all the available ninja leapt forward and engaged the Pains. Jiraiya stepped back again and closed his eyes. It would be difficult to call forth Ma and Pa with one arm, but he'd manage. They'd all manage. The Reikage and Kira's students were in the eastern sector of the city when origami swarmed them and tried to cut them. Karui, Samui, and Omoi all drew their swords and began to hack away at the paper swarm. The Reikage grabbed a fistful of the paper and crumpled it in his hand, trying to burn it with lightning chakra. Above them, Conan reformed, some of her paper wings singed. The Reikage was not amused. Akatsuki scum. Come down here. Conan merely gazed upon them, her 1,000-yard stare somewhat unsettling. Omoi became impatient with her and hurled a handful of shuriken at her face. A wall of paper appeared and blocked the shuriken, before hurling them back at him. All who oppose Pain must die. She said nothing else as she dive-bombed the 4. They just prepared for the worst. Temari, Kankuro, and Sanzoku crept along a wall close to what they assumed used to be the administration building. Sanzoku was in the front, changed into his normal small size, sniffing out any sign of what could be an Akatsuki. Temari nearly stepped on him when he came to a halt and the hairs on his back stood on end, a low growl emanating from him. She was just about to ask what was wrong when a voice broke through around them. I think the kunoichi will be tastier. She looks lean. No, I believe the shinobi will be better. He has more muscle. The strange ninja got a good look at Sanzoku and licked his lips. We believe the rat will be better eating. Yes, the gamier, the better. Sanzoku growled again and began to grow. Kankuro unsealed his puppets, and Temari hefted her fan. No one knew what Zetsu was capable of. That made him one of the most dangerous. The instant Sanzoku leapt, the two siblings were right behind him. Naruto hit another aim upside the head with his staff, bludgeoning the man to death, and spun to avoid a sword swipe. The man who swung at him backed up, and that's when Naruto noticed he was surrounded. The aim ninja all drew their sword or kunai, and the ninja who had swung at him attacked again. He and Naruto began a series of dodges and parries. Unbeknownst to the two combatants, a different fight was going on. The ring of aim surrounding the two was soon decimated without their noticing. Naruto and the ninja locked up again and pushed off one another. As the man skidded backwards, his shoulder was suddenly caught in something and a chunk of his body was ripped away. He screamed in agony before he was silenced by the sound of his neck snapping. Naruto looked on, shocked, as Hoshigaki Kisame dropped the man and pointed Samahata at him. The giant of a man looked unsteady on his feet and highly irritated. You got a lot of nerve coming here after what you did to me. I want a rematch, punk, when I'm not carrying dead weight. Let's see what those plants can do against someone who's attacking you. Naruto's face was utterly serious as he held the staff in front of him. You won't survive twice, Kisame. It's a miracle that you survived at all. Those plants aren't even supposed to have an antidote to their poison. Kisame grinned and readied himself. Guess I'm just special, brat. You'll find out how special shortly. I don't even care about Akatsuki anymore. As Naruto began to glow green, he grinned. You shouldn't. You were dead the moment you showed up here. Madara sat upon a piece of rubble in Pain's tower, looking out over the village. It wasn't the first time he'd seen a village in ruins. It probably wouldn't be the last either. The door behind him creaked and his head rose slightly. So you've come at last. I've always wondered how long it would take for you to betray me, Itachi. Itachi showed no emotion as he regarded the back of Madara. It's hard to betray one of which you were never truly in service of. What you call betrayal, I call vindication. Madara's head quirked to the side slightly, intrigued. Vindication? Of what? You killed my family. Madara turned so one Sharingan could see the younger Uchiha. I killed your family? I think your history is skewed, son. Itachi shook his head. No, my history is not skewed. You killed our family the day you killed your own brother. We were cursed to be eradicated ever since then. Someone just had to be brave enough to begin the process. Madara slowly nodded as he rose from his seat. And I suppose you think that you will end the story of the Uchiha? Itachi slid his sword from its scabbard with a small click and closed his eyes. The story is already over. This is the epilogue of the Uchiha clan. The page where we fade from the light and once again embrace the darkness as the cover falls. He opened his eyes to reveal the Sharingan and Madara snorted, drawing his own sword. I've been in the darkness, boy. I'm never going back. I never said you had a choice, Uchiha Madara. Either way, the story ends today. Chapter 26 Steps echoed through the ruined building, even though the fighting going on outside was near deafening. To the two men circling each other, there was nothing else in the world at that moment. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Itachi stared each other down, their Sharingan eyes spinning the whole while. Neither one had made the first move yet, both knowing that the other was dangerous, too dangerous to rush toward. Madara knew that Itachi was quite possibly the best Sharingan user to come about since he had been in his prime. No one could surpass his skill or his dedication, not even his now deceased brother. Itachi knew Madara was cunning, canny, and devious. He knew of the man's ability to warp time and space. He knew that the man had forgotten more about the Sharingan than he probably would ever know. But Itachi held a couple of wild cards, aces that he had wisely kept hidden until now. One was his shield, a mystic mirror that reflected any attack. He'd had to tell Madara of his sword, but he hadn't told the man the whole truth. Yes, the sword trapped the user in a blissful genjutsu for all eternity, but that was not all it did. The sword was not material and therefore, could be used in tangent with Susanoo. It was risky to use, and more than likely death-inducing, but Itachi had nothing left to gain. Madara had everything to lose. Both knew the other had to die. The footsteps stopped simultaneously and the two sprang for one another. A clang rang throughout the room, revealing both had drawn swords. Itachi threw his cloak off to the side, revealing the Uchiha fan on the back of his shirt, ripped in half by his own hand. It was a declaration to Madara that blood would not save him. The elder Uchiha sighed as he unsnapped his own cloak and let it drop to the floor, staring all the while at Itachi's back. So, you would even forsake your name? I'm disappointed in you, Itachi. I thought your goal was to re-establish the Uchiha name as an honorable one. Itachi slowly turned so he could see the orange mask of Madara with one eye, the Sharingan within it slowly turning. That dream died along with my brother. My dreams rested on his shoulders and he simply could not take the responsibility. I'm glad that Uzumaki Naruto killed him before he could shame our family even more. The younger man's eyes narrowed as Madara reached up to his mask and pushed it upward, revealing more and more of his face as he went. With one final shove, the elastic band holding it to his head slipped off and the porcelain cover clattered to the floor. I guess I won't be needing that anymore. I can see that I'll need both eyes to deal with you, child. No one else in our clan has ever come close to surpassing me. Yes, I'll have to deal with you accordingly. The sharp sound of porcelain breaking rebounded off the walls as Madara crushed the mask underfoot, his carefully measured steps taking him closer to Itachi. The younger man sighed unhappily and tightened his grip on his sword as his Sharingan began to spin faster. That was always your problem, Madara. You always saw the clan. You always saw them as an ambition for yourself. A stepping stone. That's why the clan had to die. They saw themselves as you had. They couldn't see my way of looking at the people within the clan. Madara cocked his head to the side, intrigued. And how did you see them? Itachi's mouth grew tighter and his muscles tensed. They were my family. That's why it hurt so much to kill them and why you'll never know the pain I experienced when I did it. A clan is just a gathering of like-minded individuals. A family is made up of those who love one another. Madara received no warning before Itachi rushed forward. Talking was done. This was the same as when he'd fought Hashirama, a clash of ideals. The sand and rocks sprayed everywhere as Naruto dodged another swing of Samahata. The giant blue-skinned man wielding the massive Zanbato yanked it free of the trench it had created and grinned. Not so high and mighty now, are you? I might not be at 100%, but I'm more than enough for you. Naruto skidded to a stop, his left hand slowing his slide with chakra, his right hand still clutching his staff. He'd never actually faced Kisame in battle, but he could see why the man was feared. The poison thorns he had used on the shark-like swordsman had been of the most lethal quality, plants that weren't even supposed to have an antidote. It was a testament to his tenacity that he was even standing and fighting. The pounding of feet behind Kisame alerted him to backup from Amigakure troops, and he grimaced. He didn't want to fight more of those fanatical idiots. The leader of the squad led his men right up behind the glaring Hoshigaki, his eyes locked onto Naruto. Kisame-sama. We're here to help you with the invaders. Allow us to. Kisame silenced the man without looking, swinging Samahata backwards and knocking the man's head clean off his shoulders. The others stared in horror as his body slumped to the ground and his killer snarled. He's mine. Stay the hell out of this or I'll kill you all. Naruto decided it was better to be safe than sorry and struck the ground with his staff. The aim ninja never had a chance before giant roots crushed them flat. Kisame merely cut through them and rushed towards the kneeling Naruto. The blonde rose swiftly and blocked Samahata with his staff, causing Kisame's bloodshot, beady eyes to widen. What is that thing made of? Nothing has ever stood up to Samahata. Naruto slid to the side and let Samahata continue on its way, his staff trailing behind him as he swung for Kisame's ribs. Naruto saw a kick coming out of the corner of his eyes and peeled off to the side, running up a wall, flipped away. Kisame glared at the aim mean and roared. I said he's mine. Naruto made no move to stop Kisame as he slaughtered the squad of aim ninja quickly. The shark-like man turned to Naruto, his eyes ablaze. What's the matter? Not gonna yell at me about how their lives shouldn't have been wasted? Naruto frowned as he hopped off the wall, his coat flapping as he fell. Once he was on solid ground again, he began to glow a slight green again. Not really. You're just making my job easier. I'd become a lot more used to the idea of taking life in my later years. Keep it up, Kisame. Your end is here. This day would mark another milestone in Kenkuro's life. This was the second time he had ever invaded another country, and it was also the second time he had ever faced a member of Akatsuki. The last time he had faced a member of the organization, he had been alone and he had been foolhardy. This time, he had enough backup and he had the experience, but his opponent was like nothing he had ever faced. He heard Temari wordlessly scream in frustration as she slammed her fan down in the spot where Zetsu had been previously. Sanzoku sniffed the air for the man's scent and slammed his frizzed tail down. It was maddening fighting the man. They needed a Doton user to uproot the earth, or at least someone with knowledge of what he could do. Zetsu grinned as he emerged high above them, his body halfway in the ruins of a building. We have not had this much fun in such a long time. Yes, but Mother always told us not to play with our food. Bah, Mother isn't here anymore, remember? Kenkuro's salamander puppet rushed forward and up the wall, trying to catch the Nin before he could escape again. The plant-like man merely disappeared and reappeared again, back on ground level this time. The salamander leapt off the building, landing beside Kenkuro again, who frowned and moved closer to Temari, who was grinding her teeth. Ugh, he is so infuriating. We can't seem to hit him, no matter what. Temari nodded her head grimly, her eyes searching for any sign of the eccentric man, as her hands gripped her fan tightly. We need someone like Gaara here. He could crush the sand and drive him out. Or Jiraiya-sama. His Doton jutsu are especially powerful. Sanzoku growled and edged toward them, leaving them all standing in a line, facing Zetsu. What we need is a way to keep him out of the ground. If he stays above ground, I can tear him to pieces. I can smell him, but I can't react fast enough to catch him. Temari. The blonde cut her eyes over and hissed. What? Can't you see I'm trying to watch him? Summon Kamatari next time you see Zetsu. He's really quick. Between the two of us, I think we can get him. Kenkuro leaned over. What about me? Temari smirked and hefted her fan. Use your puppets like you should have been doing from the start. Paper whipped by the rakeage cheek, leaving a shallow cut, as his fist sailed into a metal pipe, blowing right through it. Behind him, his top three ninja fought frantically to keep the other pieces of paper at bay. The large man spat on the ground and looked up to where half of Conan's body was hovering above them on a ledge, her stoic face staring down at them. The giant bent low and leapt upward toward the blue-haired woman, but the paper converged on him. The rakeage ducked his head and channeled electricity through his body, trying to fry the pieces of parchment, to no avail. Conan directed her small leaflets to slam the rakeage back to the ground. Only a few were burnt in the process. The paper returned to her body, reforming the lower half, while the rakeage stood up. So she can only do so much with her paper body that's useful. In this wet environment, it has to be a handicap. Samui stepped up next to him and spoke. Raikage-sama, we know nothing of her true abilities. What if this isn't even her? What if it's a paper clone? The rakeage grinned evilly and lightning crackled in his hands. Then we burn it to ashes and seek out the real one. Either way, this wench dies here. Ready your swords. Don't hold back. Tsunade had watched in awe as Jiraiya bit his wrists and began to paint his face swiftly with the blood. Before anyone could move, two small toads appeared on his shoulders, arguing back and forth around Jiraiya's head. Damn it, Pa. I had supper all laid out. He could have waited 30 seconds for me to put it away. Ma, Jiraiya-chan doesn't call us unless he's in trouble, and it looks like it's Pain again. The old female toad narrowed her eyes and glared out at Godrealm Pain, whose fist was clenching and unclenching. Jiraiya never took his eyes off of his former student as he began to walk forward to join the front line again. I'm sorry for getting you two into this again. I really, truly am. Ma smacked Jiraiya in the head and turned her attention back to Pain. It's nothing, Jiraiya-chan. I'm just angry that supper is going to get cold. Tsunade and the others were stunned. The blonde Hokage had heard from Jiraiya that his form was powerful, but he'd also jokingly said that it was grotesque and that women would hate it. Her eyes roamed over his large bulbous nose to his sunken eyes, from his sharpened teeth to his newly appeared goatee. It was decidedly Jiraiya, and at the same time it was a totally new entity. She could practically feel the power oozing off of him. Sensei, this will be the last time you ever use that form. You escaped God's judgment last time. You shall not do so twice. Jiraiya grinned and stepped forward, ready to lead the charge. Your so-called judgment has cost a lot of innocent people a lot of things, Nagato. My arm, the lives of all the Jinchuriki, the sanity of the people of Aimu are not what this world needs. The Toad Sannin kicked his geta off, sending them flying at Pain's head. They were easily knocked aside and the white-haired man bent low. Tsunade finally found enough of her voice to say what was on everyone's minds. Jiraiya, what did you do to yourself? Gaara, Kakashi, and the others nodded and Jiraiya snorted. We don't have time for that, Haim. I'll tell you all about it if we survive. The tall, ponytailed summon Pain was launched into the air by Demon Realm and Jiraiya pointed upward. Tsunade. Sakura. Take care of the summon's Pain. The two women set off, just as Summon's Realm brought a giant centipede and a multi-headed dog onto the scene. The rest of the group gathered around Jiraiya, letting him take command. The old pervert and the Nidai Sannin all smirked and rushed forward, gunning for God Realm. Take whichever one you can. Be on the lookout for trickery. The Pain's Rinnegan eyes all narrowed and they spoke in unison. Let our justice be done. The Hachibi cackled as it destroyed another building and called out to Tsubasa. That makes 40 for me. How many have you crushed, Tsubasa? The Raccoon King swiped his tail, taking out another water tower. That makes 42 structures for me. Oh ho! What's this? The two behemoths turned to find a large centipede and a dog rampaging through the city. Tsubasa grinned and began to waddle in that direction at a clipped pace. First one to kill a summons wins? How about whoever kills the most? I'm curious as to how many he really has. Agreed. Destroying buildings was getting old anyway. Tsubasa's tail whacked the dog in the head, making it cry out in pain, and the Hachibi wrapped its tentacles around the centipede, both unmindful of the fight between Tsunade, Sakura, and Summon Realm below. Naruto and Kisame both noticed the summons of Pain and Kisame grinned. Looks like your friends don't have much longer. Pain seems to be pulling out all the stops. It's just a matter of time before they're stomped flat. Naruto's grimace turned back to a grin when he noticed Tsubasa waddle onto the scene and engage the dog, the Hachibi tackling the centipede. The blonde pushed the shark-like man backwards with a sudden thrust and sent a volley of vines to grab him. Kisame, though he was stumbling slightly, hacked away at the vines, none of them ever touching him. It seems the sides are even now. It was only a matter of time before Tsubasa and the Hachibi decided to join in the fight, instead of just destroying things. Now then, before we were so rudely interrupted, allow me to show you a bit more of what I could have done to you that day. Kisame wasn't about to give his foe an inch. He had had a long time to recover from that poison, but some of it was still in his veins, and the exertion from fighting was not helping him fend off the bile he could feel at the back of his throat. The blue-skinned man had never been sick a day in his life, and that sensation of being weak and helpless, he never wanted to feel that again. Samahata collided with that strange staff again and both men struggled against the other. Kisame reached out with his free hand and grabbed onto the blonde's throat, trying to choke the life out of him, when the green wielder exploded into smoke. The sudden loss of force against him made Hoshigaki lurch forward. Regaining his footing quickly, his vision caught a puddle of water and the sight of Naruto bearing down on him with a Rasengan. The sharp-toothed man spun quickly and blocked the attack with Samahata, absorbing the chakra. Nice try, kid, but you should have known better. Kisame screamed hoarsely when something suddenly bit into his legs, and he looked down to see those familiar black thorns that had given him trouble before, another Naruto directing them with that damnable staff. The blonde who had tried to use Rasengan on him disappeared and the former member of the Seven Swordsmen shouted to the heavens. Damn you and your clones. I hate you. Naruto didn't even bother to grin. It was time to finish this one off and rejoin the others. His aura glowed a brighter green and he slammed the staff into the ground once more. Giant trees erupted from the ground, uprooting buildings and piping systems, encircling the two men. A wave of the staff brought forth vines that wove themselves around the trees, pulling them closer together, until no light could be seen between the bark. Kisame stood upright and gritted his teeth as he dragged Samahata across the deep scratches that Naruto's blade had made, in an effort to bleed out the poison. His beady eyes glanced all around at the arena Naruto had formed for them and a devious plan came to his mind. So I take it this thing you've made is escape-proof? Naruto nodded, a smirk on his face. Airtight? Another nod. Watertight? Naruto's smirk widened but quickly disappeared when Kisame cackled loudly. The blue-skinned man couldn't believe his luck. His own smirk made Naruto uneasy. I guess they never shared the details of my fight with Madogai with you. This little area will be your watery grave. Naruto watched as Kisame flipped through a few hand signs and water began to spew from his mouth, filling the area as if by magic, for no human body could possibly hold that much within them. He cursed in his mind. Of course, Kisame was an elite for a reason. He was the premier Suiton user alive at the moment. This was not beyond the scope of his power. As the water rose, Naruto used his chakra to stay afloat. It would be much harder to use his green powers with this much water about, or would it? Kisame's evil chuckle echoed across the blue expanse as he began to sink below the surface. Welcome to my world, you little bastard. Let's see how you like being on the receiving end of things that bite. Naruto readied himself for whatever may come, his mind already thinking furiously ahead. Madara had always known that Itachi was his equal. He had always known that the younger Uchiha would be a problem. The only thing that Itachi lacked was the eternal Manjikyu, and that wasn't proving to be much of a problem for him. The stoic young man was keeping up with him and then some. He'd have to try something drastic soon. Itachi's eyes darted back and forth as he and Madara exchanged blows, neither one ever landing anything decisive. Despite keeping up with his ancestor, Itachi was worried. His vision was blurring and he knew that prolonging his use of the Sharingan was dangerous. He'd have to use his available assets to even have a hope of killing the ultimate Uchiha traitor. Deciding that further wasting of time would be unwise, Itachi let his Manjikyu flare into existence, the colors of the world brightening. If all went well, this would be the last time a Sharingan was seen in this world. Madara was unfazed and stared across the expanse. I'll forgive you if you cease with this futility, Itachi. I know rebellion runs deep in the youth of the world. Itachi's answer was to open his eyes wide and the black flames of Amaterasu licked and burned their way across the building's floor toward Madara. The older man watched the flames approach and his own Sharingan began to spin. Itachi ignored the flames that were being extinguished and instead sprinted forward through the flames, clearing a path as he went. His sword dipped down into the dark flame, coating his blade, and he slashed at Madara's chest. Engrossed in his task of controlling the flames, Madara's reaction was a tad too late. Itachi's sword bit across his chest, the fire searing into his flesh, and the wielder of the eternal Manjikyu screamed in agony. Letting his control of the rest of the flames go, he turned his attention to the ones licking at his now blackened skin. Itachi noticed the lack of control and regained the remaining flames. With his chest no longer on fire, Madara ground his teeth in fury, and shouted. Enough! Itachi watched in disbelief as the flames all disappeared into nothingness and looked back up. So he'd have to try harder. Well, that was all right. Every Sharingan was different in a way. His just happened to be a very defensive one. Tsunade watched as the exuberant Tsubasa and Hachibi tackled the summons they had been after and blinked in surprise. She was sure that the summons Pain was just as dumbfounded, but there was no time to waste. Sakura. Come on, we have to stop Pain. The girl with rose-colored hair gave a quick, concise nod and bolted after her sensei toward the blonde, ponytailed Pain. Rinnegan eyes turned to the two women and two more beasts were summoned. How rude. I wasn't finished playing with my partner yet. Hey. Don't take the rhino. That's the one I wanted. Fine, then hurry up. Now, doggy, sit. The Cerberus look-alike dog cried out in pain and crumbled to the ground as Tsubasa slammed all its weight onto its spine, crushing it beneath his weight. Leaving the mutt to mend itself or die, he didn't really care which. The Raccoon King turned his attention to the giant panda that had appeared. With identical snarls, the two leviathans tied up again. The summons Pain scowled and prepared to summon more animals when a fist impacted with his face. The ponytailed man flew to the right, toward a giant pipe, when a gloved fist slammed into his skull and he was sent flying at high speeds to the ground. Tsunade and Sakura both channeled chakra to their feet and rushed after him. Letting even one Pain have a moment to recuperate was a huge mistake. Jiraiya barked directions to all the assembled ninja, sending them toward the Pains as he strode forward, his eyes locked onto the body of Yahiko. He struggled to keep his breathing under control, his rage and excitement battling each other for supremacy. Pain simply looked on as his other bodies were entangled in individual fights. You won't win here. Your strategy has been tried before and it has always failed. The white-maned toad Sannin stopped walking and chuckled. You're still the same scared little child that I remember. You might be revered as a god by your followers, but you're really a coward, Nagato. Rinnegan eyes narrowed, the first true sign that Pain was annoyed by anything. Jiraiya smirked and cut a glance to his arm. I don't know what this body's ability is. That puts me at a disadvantage, but I know something about you that you'll deny to your dying day. And that is? Jiraiya's smirk widened into a broad grin, made even more sinister due to his new looks. You're a coward, Nagato. A true coward. You're not even really here. The auburn eyebrows of the Yahiko body flew upward and Fukasaku squirmed a bit. Jiraiya-chan, you're wasting time. I know. But he needs to know that once we're done with these puppets that we're coming for him. He won't be able to hide behind corpses anymore. Pain didn't even bother to move as Jiraiya suddenly sprang forward, his fist drawn back. We shall see, sensei. Temari watched carefully as Zetsu rose from the ground once more, her bloodied thumb swiping across the parchment of the fan quickly, and with a cry and mighty swing, Kamatari hurtled toward the two-faced man at breakneck speeds, his scythes at the ready. The weasel chirped as he flew, sending scythe after scythe at Zetsu's head. With a speed they hadn't thought he possessed, the man from Kusa disappeared into the ground again, and Kamatari came to a rest on the rubble of all the mortar and metal girders that he had destroyed. Clucking his tongue in annoyance, the vest-wearing summon scampered across the moist ground to stand by his mistress. I missed. Temari shook her head and clasped her fan closed again. It's nothing. Sanzoku can't catch him either. Kamatari looked up at his much larger furry cohort and snorted. Well, he has been getting fat, just lying around all the time. Sanzoku growled and shook the moisture from his coat. I'll deal with you and your snide comments later, cousin. Right now, I need your help in finding him. Don't aim for his head next time. Send your blades to his knees, make him leave the earth. If he's not touching a solid surface, he's exposed. Temari spread her fan once more and Kamatari hopped onto the parchment with a squeak, his giant scythe tucked behind his back. His beady eyes narrowed as they waited for Zetsu to poke up again and he prepared to summon more of his deadly sickles. The blonde woman grimaced and spoke in a quiet voice. Kankuro, hench your puppets into us and then cloak us with a genjutsu. Keep everything as true to form as possible. Draw him out to the center of that clear spot. Kankuro nodded his head and did as he was told, his puppets rushing to the middle and looking around as he hid the original bodies with a clever illusion. The four watched as the puppets began to bicker with one another, twirling to watch all sides. Zetsu leered at the puppets from a high vantage point across the clearing, deciding how to deal with them best. He was getting bored at this point and hungry. Kakashi, Lee, and Guy had taken the mechanical pain as far away as they could, trying to keep its vision obscured from the others. It didn't matter if the other pains shared a field of vision with each other if they couldn't watch each other's backs to make it effective. Guy and Lee were giving a ball, dodging the attacks of the multi-faced man while Kakashi stood back, waiting for an opportune chance to strike. As he stood there, he noticed that the area they were fighting in had already been ravaged by someone, as there were several bodies strewn about, and several telltale signs that Naruto had been there. Case in point, the various vines and flora that were not native to AIM. His trained eye then noticed that, while the rest of the area was mortar, concrete, and steel, there was a large structure that seemed out of place. Edging over towards the object of his curiosity, he knocked on it and found it to be an expanse of trees, incredibly large trees, that were bound together and formed some sort of fort. Leaving the mystery of the trees for the moment, he turned his attention back to the melee below and watched carefully with his Sharingan for an opening, but in the back of his mind, he was worried. If Naruto had been here recently, then where was he now? And who was he fighting? High above the city, in the uppermost room of the tower that Itachi and Madara were battling in, a blue-haired woman pressed against the glass of a window, looking out over the fighting that was taking place. A heavy sigh escaped her lips as she turned away, her fingers trailing down the pane, making a slight squeak. Conan opened her eyes and looked across the room to the other occupant, who sat in a curved, eggshell-shaped chair. My Bunshin will not last long against the Raikage and his followers. Soon, they'll seek out the others and begin to help them. I know. Her normally stoic visage flashed with anger for but a moment, before returning to passiveness. I don't know what is going on with your bodies, but I know that you have never faced a force like this before. Hanzo was getting on in years when you defeated him, however powerful he may have been. I know. Conan knelt down on her knees, before the figure, and gazed into its eyes. Gray, ringed eyes stared back at her from between a mass of black hair, the traces of madness, behind them easily visible. Her pierced lip trembled and she reached out a hand for the man's pale cheek. I'm scared, Nagato. What if we'd been traveling the wrong path all along? What if Jiraiya-sensei was right last time? You've been calling yourself a god for so long. The gods will not look kindly on that if you die and have to face them. Rinnegan eyes twitched back and forth, but he didn't register otherwise that he'd heard her. Conan stood up and went back to the window, looking out over the sprawl once more. A scratchy voice floated to her ears and she closed her eyes. I am pain. I am God. Just as the old stories tell of life on earth being extinguished because of man's wickedness, so shall my wrath be felt. I will cleanse this world and begin a new one, under a new God. Conan didn't answer. She'd heard it all before. That didn't make the sinking feeling in her stomach go away though. Chapter 27. Boom. 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 Kakashi looked over his shoulder at the giant trees behind him, unnerved with the incessant pounding coming from within. He could only imagine what was in there that could make that kind of unholy racket and hoped that it didn't have anything to do with Naruto. He'd only just recently gotten back in his former student's good graces. He didn't need him dying on him just yet. A hand rocketed past his face, barely missing him, and struck the bark hard, sending a shower of splinters in the copy ninja's direction. He leapt to the side and ran for better cover to wait for his chance to strike. Guy and Lee engaged the pain body again, distracting it from sending more missiles his way. Curious as to what the construct's true purpose was, Kakashi crept back over and looked at where the pain had struck at him. A tiny crack in the structure was bleeding water and the crack was getting bigger every second. Well, he'd have to figure it out later. The cat part of his nickname was killing him at the moment though. And you know what they say about cats and curiosity, hold still, you little bastard. Naruto ground his teeth in frustration as he ran sideways on the trees he had created, a water shark striking the wall just behind him every few feet. Kisame was showing just why he was a prominent Sweight time user, effortlessly creating the sharks, despite his weakened condition. Kisame had not come out of the water for several minutes as he tried to skewer Naruto with water spikes, tear his flesh with water sharks, or rend his flesh with a quick swipe from Samehada when the blonde ventured too far out into the water. The blonde couldn't even catch a moment to concentrate so he could try his plan, and Kisame knew that. His head was only above water long enough to taunt his opponent before diving under again. Naruto was noticing something that he hoped Kisame wasn't though. As he ran around the cylinder, he noticed that the water level was dropping at a slow, but steady pace. This could only mean that something had punctured the outside wall at some point, meaning there was fighting going on near them. Imprisoning both him and his opponent suddenly wasn't such a hot idea, as he couldn't see or help his comrades outside. His hands flew together in the seal for Kage Bunshin, and 4 of them puffed into existence, already running along with their creator. He needed to get Kisame out of the water and fast. The 4 peeled off and sprinted across the water, stopping at even intervals near the edge. Kisame poked his head out of the water just high enough for his nose to break the surface and breathed. The gills on the side of his head provided him with a bit of oxygen beneath the surface, but he was still human and had to come up for air. He'd noticed the 4 clones as they ran across the water's surface. How could he not? The ripples they sent throughout the liquid reverberated through him. He didn't need to know what his idiot of a foe was planning, he just knew he had to stop it. The Rasengan they were forming weren't helping his disposition any, and he took off toward one, sending water sharks for the other 3. The sharks hit their mark and he shredded the surprised clone with Samehada, letting his sword eat up the chakra hungrily, before whipping around to seek out Naruto. The Jinchuriki was standing parallel to the water, his eyes shut in concentration, his hands wrapped tightly around the gnarled staff. Kisame didn't need to know what he was concentrating on to know it was bad news for him and propelled through the water like a torpedo. Naruto's eyes snapped open when Kisame's shoulder slammed into his gut and he was rocketed up the side of his ring of trees, before being driven into them with bone-jarring force. Kisame snarled, slammed Samehada into the wood hard enough that it would stick, and grabbed the blonde's head, pushing his nose just millimeters from the spiny barbs of the Zanbato. Kisame's gravely voice seemed to echo as he breathed hard, the exertion beginning to take its toll as the poison wound its way through his veins. No more games, boy. I'm sick of this. You've caused me a lot of pain and that is unacceptable. Now, I'm going to cause you some. First, I'm going to use Samehada on your face like a cheese grater. Then, I'm going to cut each limb from your body one by one. I want you to feel what it's like to be pierced by little spikes. Too bad Samehada isn't poisonous. Are you quite through? Kisame's head jerked back slightly in surprise before he grinned ferally. Still trying to act like a big shot, huh? You ain't got shit now, kid. Want to know what I'm going to do with that oversized back scratcher of yours? I'm going to use it to rearrange your bitch's face. The blue eyes of Naruto seemed to become like ice as he turned his face as far to the side as he could to glare at his captor. Don't talk about her like that. I'll make this hurt more than it has to before you die. A cackle echoed through the wooden prison and Kisame's teeth shone with maliciousness. Scratch that. I'm just going to rip your throat out. I hate the sound of your voice. Kisame opened his mouth as wide as he could and leaned down to complete his threat, when something tugged at his throat. He coughed a bit and grabbed at whatever was assailing him, his eyes flying open when he touched something plant-like. Another sharp tug and he was pulled away from the blonde, who planted his feet and stood up. More and more aquatic weeds wrapped around Kisame until only his eyes and nose were visible. Naruto took a deep breath and closed his eyes. You know, you really are something, Kisame. You fought off a poison without antidote, fought me at less than full strength, and proceeded to make a lake and fire off several high-powered jutsu. But his eyes locked onto the giant blue man's, and Kisame's beady eyes glared back. I wonder, Kisame, how long can you hold your breath? Small white eyes flashed open and Kisame began to struggle against his bonds. Naruto motioned downwards with his hand and the weeds began to sink, pulling Kisame along with them. He glared at the blonde as he sank, his whole body shaking with unbridled anger. If he could just call Samehada to his hand, but he was so weak. He'd been running on fumes for at least the past 3 minutes. A Kirigakure ninja's greatest fear was drowning in their own element. Being masters of water, it was both dreaded and shameful to be taken under and drown. That was the reality that Kisame was now facing. Naruto watched as Kisame sank below the surface, leaving hardly a ripple as the weeds held him firm as they took him down. He felt nothing from this like he had with Sasuke's death. He had fought Kisame, and he had won. Kisame had to die, otherwise he'd just heal up and come after him again. He looked down into the crystal-clear water and could make out the eyes of the shark man as they radiated hate, defiant to the last. Kisame held his breath for nearly 3 minutes before trying to filter in oxygen through his gills. To his dismay, only a small amount of the much-needed air siphoned into his lungs. Horror sat in when he realized that the mass of weeds was sucking out all of his precious oxygen out of the water to speed its growth. His mouth opened involuntarily as his lungs cried for air, and he sucked in some water. His chest began to feel heavy, and he turned his gaze upward. The clear brilliancy of the water allowed him to see the man who had defeated him know the man who had killed him. His brain began to feel foggy, and he struggled to maintain that glare, that last defiant glare. He would not die like this. He wouldn't die by drowning. He was Hoshigaki Kisame, member of the Seven Swordsmen, member of the feared Akatsuki, wielder of Samahata, and the most feared Suiton user in the world. He wouldn't die like this like Kisame never felt the subtle constriction that the hydrilla was putting on him, forcing all the air out of his body and letting the water fill up his lungs. He never knew when he had begun to drown, so focused was he on his hate of Uzumaki Naruto. His vision just kept fading and fading until it all went black. Naruto looked down into the lifeless eyes of one of the most feared men in the world for a moment longer and turned away, walking up the edge of the wall and crouched on the ledge. He'd leave this construct up for now, just in case. Hunkered down on the ledge, he looked out over the area. There were several disturbances all around, but only one fight he could see. 2 green blurs rushed around one of the bodies of Pain, trying in vain to smash it to smithereens. The blonde smirked and watched for an opening. He had an idea of how to get rid of that particular Pain. Zetsu emerged from the ground right behind Sanzoku and licked his lips. He'd never eaten a red panda before, but he'd heard it was very gamey meat. With an omnivorous diet, it was sure to have a distinctive flavor. He'd heard what his foes had said about the Genjutsu, and had already released himself from it as soon as he'd felt it tug at his psyche. Of course, dual personalities helped the process a bit. A vicious smile raked across his white and black face, and he suppressed the urge to lick his lips. The oversized rat had to die first. It was more dangerous than the other 3 combined. It was able to smell him, and if those claws or those teeth got a hold of him, it would be his body torn to shreds. With great care, the cannibalistic shinobi's jaw-like protrusions opened wide and he lunged forward only to hit air. Yellow eyes widened in anger and surprise as the sound of whistling blades reached his ears. The former Kusa ninja whirled about and found Kamatari hurtling through the air, several sides following behind him, his own held firmly in his paws. The weasel was so close to the ground that his fur was getting dirty, and Zetsu realized that he would not be quick enough to retreat into the ground as close as the summon was. Running to the side was also not available as the wind jutsu from Temari and the amount of steel headed in his direction forced him to go in one direction. Zetsu knew it was a trap, he knew what they were up to. Kamatari passed beneath him, the whistling of his steel scythes fading as the distance, and the two-toned man's face twisted into ugliness as the weasel smirked. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw that infuriating salamander puppet clinging to the wall suddenly leap toward him, its tail ready to stab and its mouth open, needles at the ready. A volley of needles flew toward him and Zetsu kawaramied with a piece of pipe, the ring of metal on metal resounding through the area. He hadn't had to use jutsu in so long that he was somewhat rusty and had nearly been skewered. No doubt those needles were coated in a poison, quite like the one that Kisame had been stricken with. The psychotic ninja crouched behind a mass of concrete and looked out over the area for Temari. The girl was almost as big an obstacle as the rat, coming up with strategies and barking orders. Kill her and they would become disorganized. Zetsu licked his lips in anticipation and rose a bit more to get a better look. A sharp pain in his leg caused him to nearly cry out and he glanced downward, sure that he had been careless and a jagged piece of metal or glass had scratched him. He'd nearly given himself away in surprise. His yellow eyes widened exponentially when he found a perfect U-shape on his right leg. He'd forgotten about that damned size-altering rat for a moment. But when had it struck? He hadn't seen it near him, hadn't heard it, and hadn't sensed it. A sharp pain in the back of his head erupted as he rocketed back to the middle of their battle zone, flopping unceremoniously to the ground. He was immediately surrounded by all four of his enemies and the puppets. Zetsu stood to his full height, his skull still racked with pain, and sneered at all of them. "We are through playing with you. We shall strip the flesh from your bones. But we'll make sure you're alive to watch as we do." Sanzoku's teeth were on full display as he snarled. "Not if I strip yours first." The air in Jiraiya's lungs rushed out as he hit the wall, and Ma and Pa cried out in surprise. Despite being fused to his shoulders, it was still a jarring blow, and not a very pleasant one. The bored look on Godrealm's face wasn't helping the three's disposition at all as it stood with its arms at its sides. Would a coward stand and face you as such, sensei? Would a coward fight you as such? Jiraiya sucked in a huge lungful of air and used his good arm to push himself back to his feet. With Senjutsu chakra running through him, the blow hadn't actually hurt, it had just stunned him. A smirk crossed underneath his bulbous nose, the jagged teeth making him look even more fearsome an opponent. "Nagato, you're a coward because you won't face me," as a student to his teacher. "Yahiko is dead. This is a perversion of time and life that I can't believe you would do. You were such a kind boy." Ma and Pa hunkered down when they felt Jiraiya tense up, and set their jaws when he rushed forward again, his fist cocked back for a mighty blow. The body of Yahiko frowned and blasted its former sensei back again with a Shinra Tensei. Jiraiya slammed into the wall again and was immediately back to his feet, his eyes shadowed by his hair. "I think that's enough research, don't you, elders?" Ma nodded her head and her round eyes blinked. "Yep. More than enough. We know his weakness now." "Shoo, Ma. You'll give it away." Godrealm tilted its head to the side, curious as to what they meant. He had been careful in all his fights thus far, especially with his primary body, not to give away any secrets. Jiraiya rushed forward again and Payne's eyebrow twitched in annoyance as the man slammed into the invisible barrier again. The barrier dropped as the large, white-maned man rocketed backwards and the count began till the next time he could use the jutsu. Without warning, Payne exploded into the back of his skull and he found himself flying forward, straight into one of the large metal pipes. Jiraiya landed deftly in a crouch, a smug look on his face, as Payne righted himself once more, a look of shock on his normally bored face. 5 seconds, Nagato. That's your secret for this body. Without your shared vision, you can't predict anything behind you. You're vulnerable." Payne stood to his full height and frowned. His cloak was muddied now and he'd been touched. That had never happened before. "I see. I guess I'll have to increase my odds once again then, sensei." Tsubasa, the Hachibi, Sakura, and Tsunade stared down at the broken remains of the summons and the summon realm Payne. It had been a difficult battle. The Cerberus had kept splitting into smaller dogs and reforming. The panda was impervious to pain. The rhino was thick-skinned. The centipede was just creepy. The Hachibi's breathing was labored as it stood beside Tsubasa and it turned its head slowly. "I'm through. I can't sustain this any longer. If the two of you can hasten Kira's healing, he will help in the coming battles. I risk destroying my host's body if I stay any longer." Tsubasa nodded and bowed his head. "Thank you for your help. It was most appreciated. Please. I haven't had a chance to cut loose like that in ages. I enjoyed myself immensely." The Hachibi began to shrink in size until it left a battered and smoking Hachi Kira. Sakura began to heal him immediately, being careful to only hasten his own natural abilities as Tsunade stood watch. Her senses, enhanced by chakra, adrenaline, and battle, caught the whistle of the air as it was displaced. She spun on her heel and threw her right fist forward, her eyes widening when it collided with Hell Realm, sending the body flying off to her left. The body collapsed against a building, sending a shower of rubble down upon it, and sat unmoving. Tsunade kept her gaze trained on it, knowing that that couldn't have possibly been enough, when the sand around them began to shift and Gaara stepped into the clearing. I hate the moisture of this place. It makes fighting such a bother. Sakura looked up from her work on Kira, relief on her face. Tsunade, however, was not as receptive. Damn it, Gaara. We're supposed to keep them separated. The red-headed Kazekage looked down at the prone body of the summons pain and shrugged. Yours is dead. What is the danger? Tsunade's eyes narrowed as she hissed at the younger Kage, listening as the rubble began to shift around. We don't know what these bodies do. They're dead in the first place. Two together could be trouble. Gaara simply stared at the Hell Realm as it stood once more, his eyes narrowing. I swear, it keeps getting back up. It's like there's something special about it, but I haven't figured out what it is yet. Hell Realm stared out across the expanse between it and its opponents, its eyes finally settling on the prone body of Summon's realm. So you actually defeated that realm. Very good. No one ever has before, except for Sensei. It was all futile, however. Tsunade's eyes widened when a huge head appeared behind Hell Realm and she screamed at Sakura. Sakura! Get out of there! The pink-haired girl's head whipped around just in time to see the huge Enma head and the tendril coming from it. Scooping Kira's body up, she leapt away, just as it grabbed for her. Gaara growled and sent his sand toward Hell Realm, only to have Tsunade stop him. We need to see what it's capable of. We need to know what that head does. Gaara's perpetual frown deepened as his sand swirled around menacingly. I don't want to know what it does. It tried to grab Sakura-san, so it can't be good. Let's just destroy it. The two watched the tendril as it crawled across the body of Summon's pain and brought it back into the mouth of the Enma head. The head chewed for a bit before spitting out Summon's realm, good as new. Tsunade gawked at the sight and Gaara's teeth ground together. See? I told you waiting was a bad idea. Hell Realm didn't seem to notice their discomfort as it looked over Summon's realm. That was impressive. I won't allow you to destroy my summons again though. The three active shinobi grimaced and prepared themselves for what was sure to be the worst fight of their lives. Pain seemed to have limitless energy, something that they did not possess. The two Pains readied themselves, sure of victory now that their shared vision would help them. No one in the area thought to look up. Madara's teeth threatened to ground down to the gum in fury. Itachi stood before him, enshrouded in the protective armor of Susanoo, the giant form looming menacingly with its shield and mystical sword. This was one form he could never match. His eternal Manjikyu allowed him to forever be youthful, full of vitality, and gave him free use of his Sharingan. It gave him many things: control over Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, but Susanoo had always been beyond his reach. Itachi stood in the middle of the spectral figure, gazing out over the expanse at his ancestor. He hated this man with all his heart. Madara was the focal point, the sole reason for the decline of the Uchiha clan. Everything that had ever happened could be traced back to his betrayal of family and country. Only one thought crossed the younger Uchiha's mind. Unforgivable, the ghostly warrior that was Susanoo raised its sword above its head and sent it crashing down toward Madara. The elder shinobi rushed away as the weapon crashed down, only to pass through the ground, leaving no trace of damage. The sword rose again and settled on the long-nosed being's shoulder. Madara regained his bearings, his mind racing for some grasp of what he had seen. That the sword was merely an illusion was not feasible. If it was incorporeal, then it had another purpose, besides physical damage. Itachi was never one to flaunt his abilities, and therefore, he knew nothing beyond the few battles the boy had had since he had taken him under his wing. This thing that had taken form around him was something he was totally unprepared for. Another swing of the sword, another dodge, and Madara unloaded a huge fire jutsu at the being. The ghostly shield came up before Itachi, and the elder statesman of Akatsuki watched in awe as the fire impacted with the shield, stopping it completely. Itachi stared out at him from within, his Sharingan-clad eyes unblinking and filled with hate. The flames died down and the shimmering form of Susanoo grinned, ready for the next assault. Madara was livid. Nothing he could do would work apparently. Well, it was not the first time he'd had a setback. Being eternal was as much a boon as it was a curse. He could afford to retreat and plan again. Akatsuki was one of his better ideas, but it was not his only one. The eternal man readied himself for a leap out of the hole behind Itachi. You won't make it. Madara froze in his tracks, his knees already locked for the jump, and spared a glance at Itachi. And why is that? I've come too far to allow an upstart like you to stop me. Itachi merely blinked, his lips hardly moving as he spoke. You won't make it because I already have you. You're within the barrier of Susanoo. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Madara slowly stood to his full height and snorted. I think I would know if I was captured, young one. I've avoided all the swings of that sword and your armor still enshrouds you, not me. You're wrong. Madara's eyebrows rose to his hairline as the shimmering form of Susanoo began to form around him. His breathing became erratic as he ground out his question. How? Itachi merely looked up through the destroyed roof as the rain began to fall again. Susanoo is not merely half a body, it is a whole one. Its size simply encompasses whatever it wishes. The breastplate of the armor is the strongest point, so it simply enshrouds its user in its chest. The rest is below ground. Incorporeality is one of the features that best identify it. Now, you're trapped in here with me. There is no escape. Madara's brain raced furiously in a bid to find a way out. Susanoo, however, was an impenetrable barrier. Not even Pain Shinra Tensei could match it. Seeing physicality was not an available option anymore, he decided to try diplomacy. What now then, Itachi? We're both trapped until you release the jutsu. What do you hope to accomplish? For the first time in years, Uchiha Itachi smiled. Such a sight was enough to make even the normally unflappable Madara quiver. I plan to end the legacy of the Uchiha clan. Today, our clan dies with us. Madara could only wonder what the boy meant. Did he mean to kill himself as well in some misguided form of seppuku? But Susanoo protected all in its shell, what could he do to himself? The spectral form of Susanoo raised its arm above its head and flipped the sword to a reverse grip, the blade now held to stab downward. The sudden realization of what Itachi was planning brought only one word to Madara's mind. No, the Raikage growled as he let the last pieces of paper flutter through his fingers before turning to his followers. It was merely a bunshin. The bitch is still out there. Come on. We have to find Kira. I don't sense the Hachibi anymore. Hell Realm and Summons Realm prepared themselves for battle, Hell Realm taking a step back and Summons Realm taking a step forward, ready to summon more creatures. Tsunade heard the groan of Kira as he awoke, but feared it wouldn't be enough. With their field of vision now multiplied by 2, these pains would be nigh impossible to beat. The figure sitting above leapt from its perch, hurtling down towards the people below it. Its size began to grow and grow as it fell before Summons Pain could slap its hand to the ground. A resounding boom echoed throughout the area and the 4 allied shinobi covered their eyes against the assault of mud and water. Gaara was the first to lower his arms and relief flowed through him. Sitting on top of both of the pains was Tsubasa, his teeth bared menacingly. The 4 ninja watched as the Raccoon King reached down with his dexterous fingers and picked up the prone body of Hell Realm, lifting it to where he could see it. It seems that this pain is very important. Well, it's been a while since I've had a snack. Sakura and Tsunade looked away from the scene as Tsubasa bit into the body of Hell Realm, severing the shoulders and head away from the rest. Whatever chance it had of reforming itself was gone. As the women turned green, Kira and Gaara watched as Tsubasa swirled the meat around in his mouth, before grimacing and spitting it onto the ground. Blia. It tastes awful, like rotten meat. The 2 men laughed at the king's misfortune as it ran its hands over its tongue, trying to get the awful taste out of its mouth. Humor could be found, even in the midst of battle. Kakashi still had not found his opening with Azura Realm and it was beginning to frustrate him. A trained assassin, he may be, but he'd never met an opponent as frustrating as this one. Guy and Lee were having trouble as well. Despite their speed, they couldn't land a truly damaging blow on the mechanical man. To make matters worse, that wooden citadel behind them worried him. He didn't know what was going on in there, but it couldn't be good. The water was escaping more frequently now. If only they could find a way to neutralize this body. His senses suddenly picked up an incoming energy source and Kakashi looked up in time, just to catch the sight of Naruto hurtling out of the sky and crushing the mechanical pain below him. Metal and flesh flew everywhere as the pain exploded and Naruto stood upright, a grin on his face. You guys looked like you needed some help. Kakashi sighed and closed his eyes as he lowered his Hatay, partly in relief that Naruto was alright, partly in frustration that his former student had again entered a battle without full knowledge of what was going on. Konan gasped when the memories of her Bunshin reached her. The Raikage and his swordsman were fearsome opponents and her Bunshin had not been a challenge at all. A slight, low growl behind her made her attention turn to her companion. Your Bunshin is gone, yes? She nodded her head in affirmation. Nagato frowned and his fingers gripped the armrests of his chair with more force. This Uzumaki and his pet raccoon are most troublesome. They are alike in their battle, planning to a degree that is uncanny. What happened? Rinnegan eyes locked with Conan's and Nagato's teeth bared. They destroyed Hell Realm, Azura Realm, and Summon's Realm. Crushed them in similar manners even though they were nowhere near each other. It is most annoying. Konan turned back to the window, gazing out. I don't see the Hachibi anymore. What will you do now? I will kill Sensei and everyone else I can. Then, we shall see. Can you bring another Hell Realm to the front line? His eyes closed, in frustration or pain she couldn't tell. I have never found another suitable body for Hell Realm. It seems that my last 3 paths will have to do. Can you defeat Sensei and the others? We shall see. It is foolish of them to challenge a god on his own turf. Amigakure is my realm. It is my heaven and my hell. I rule all here. I control all here. And I will bring down my wrath upon them. Conan's forehead touched the cold glass, and she closed her eyes as she whispered. What if your wrath isn't enough? Nagato sank back into his chair, his eyes narrowing. We shall see. Chapter 28 Incoming. Jiraiya barely dodged to the side as the Raikage plowed into God Realm Pain, slamming the walking corpse across the muddy ground, and landing heavily, his followers behind him. The Raikage grinned as he came out of his crouch, moving in front of the panting Jiraiya. Looks like you need some help, old man. Don't worry, the swordsmen of Kumo and the world's strongest man are here to save the day. Jiraiya's beady eyes stared up wearily at the Kage, not really knowing how to respond. He needed a breather, that was true enough. Perhaps this was fortuitous. If they could keep Pain occupied for a little bit until Ma and Pa could gather more natural energy, he puts up a barrier to repel attacks. After that, you have a 5-second window where he can't use his jutsu anymore. Keep him occupied until I come up with a plan. The giant black man snorted and squared himself off against the now recovered Pain, the swordsmen unhooking their weapons and readying themselves. 5 seconds is all we need. Catch your breath, Jiraiya of the Sannin. We'll handle it from here. Pain let out a long, slow breath as his gray, ringed eyes took in the ninja of Kumogakure. You don't interest me. Go away. Samui took a step forward, her sword held at her side. You interest me. I want to know how a dead man can walk. Maybe if I slice you up enough, I'll find out how you do it. The gray eyes narrowed and Pain's cloak fluttered slightly. Yahiko will not be destroyed. Omoi quirked his left eyebrow upward and rolled his cigarette around his mouth. Who the fuck is Yahiko? I thought your name was Pain? It doesn't matter. Let's go. The 3 swordsmen followed their leader into battle, the stony-faced Pain awaiting them. Human Realm had not been having nearly as hard a time as the other Pains. His opponents, while skilled, were nowhere near powerful enough to hinder him in any way. Team 10 had been little more than a nuisance, with Shikamaru's planning and shadow manipulation being the main factors of annoyance. Choji had tried his best to keep the body occupied while Shikamaru came up with a plan, but the taijutsu using Pain swept him aside like a child. Growing to the size of the summons had only made him a bigger target for the long-maned corpse. Pain's fist had found its way into his oversized, rotund belly. The gentle giant's girth reduced rapidly and a hard knee found its way to his chin. Ino had tried to use a chakra scalpel to cut the body's tendons, but she was nowhere near quick enough. Just before the auburn-haired cadaver ruined her pretty face with a punch, it froze in place and she heard the 5 words that made her muscles relax. Ka-ge-main no jutsu, success. Shikamaru let his hands pull apart, his body shuddering with exertion as the clinically dead body fought his control. His breathing was ragged as he forced his arms to his sides. Ino, disable him. Do it now. The blonde pulled a kunai from her pouch and took a hesitant step forward, before looking back over her shoulder. But Shika, you'll get hurt too. Shikamaru grunted as his right arm began to move on its own, a sure sign that his control was slipping. Just do it. You can heal me afterwards. We still don't know how Choji's doing. Ino didn't bother to nod as she turned her attention back to the shaking Pain. The kunai in her hand raised into the air and lingered but for a moment before she plunged it downward into the chest of the pierced man. Shikamaru gasped in pain and his grip on Pain nearly slipped. He had to endure this. If Ino could strike a debilitating blow on Pain, then she could hurry and heal him before he bled out. It pained Ino to do this to Shikamaru. His gasps coming from behind her were like a knife through her own heart. She needed to finish this quickly. She had to help her boys. Shutting her ears off to the sound of Shikamaru's groans and whimpers of pain, she thrust the kunai down again, only for her hand to stop. She looked up into the Rinnegan eyes of Pain, his gaze cutting through her. That's enough. Ino began to shake as his grip began to crush her wrist, only to cry out when she felt the bones begin to pop. Pain cast her aside haphazardly and glared at Shikamaru, who held a hand to his chest, his breathing labored. I'll deal with you shortly, girl. Shikamaru had never felt this weak. Not when fighting Tayuya all those years ago, not when he was in his second Chunin exams, not even when he fought against Kakuzu and Haiden. His team was decimated once again and now this abomination was going to kill them all. And thanks to his own willingness to sacrifice himself like a shogi piece, he was unable to protect himself. Pain's unblinking eyes rolled down to the kneeling Nara, taking him in. I've heard that the Nara clan prides themselves on being incredibly smart. You all play shogi. You know about the sacrifice of pawns to save the king. That's what made your little play here so strange. You're obviously the king. Why did you try to sacrifice yourself? Shikamaru merely rolled an eye upward and grunted. Troublesome, yes. Your Pain's hand shot forward to grasp the Nara's forehead and the young man closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Rinnegan eyes turned to the side, catching a flash of blonde, and Pain blasted Shikamaru with a roundhouse kick as he grabbed an attacking Ino by her head. Ino felt the fingers on her forehead and suddenly she could feel something probing deeper inside. A slight tug on something that was uniquely hers. Light flashed and she shivered. Her father had described the feeling of mind walking to her in detail. Whatever this was, it was similar and yet so very different. A chill ran up her spine as her eyes locked with those of the Rinnegan. Another tug and she fought back. Whatever he was reaching for deep inside her wasn't his to have. She used every bit of her will to push his presence out and then she screamed. Pain let go of the blonde girl with a gasp, her body crumpling to the ground unceremoniously. A tingle ran up his arm that left him baffled. No one had ever fought off his soul-stealing technique before. Intriguing. He left a battered and broken Team 10 in his wake as he stalked off towards where Hungry Ghost Realm was fighting a pair of Hyuga. When this was all over, he might have to come back for the girl. Hell Realm might have a new body. Itachi watched as the spectral sword of Susanoo came hurtling down and gasped when it entered his body, piercing his soul. He heard the cry from Madara as it entered the man as well and closed his eyes, giving himself up to his own illusion. Perhaps an eternity of lies would be kind to him. His world flashed for a moment and then all was silent. Hello, son. We've been waiting for you. Itachi took in his surroundings with wide eyes, not believing what he was seeing. He was seated before his family's dinner table. His father sat opposite him, quietly sipping his tea, while his mother chopped carrots for a stew. Mother? Father? Fugaku sat his teacup down and stared curiously at his son. Yes, Itachi? The younger Uchiha touched the table in front of him gingerly, as if it would fall apart. Fugaku quirked an eyebrow and frowned. What troubles you, son? Itachi looked up from the table, hope in his eyes. Is this real? Are you here? A clunk in front of him brought his attention to a bowl full of steaming stew. A soft hand settled on his shoulder and he gazed up, taking in his mother's smile. Of course we are, Itachi. Eat your stew before it gets cold. Itachi's head nodded absent-mindedly as his hand groped for the spoon. Gingerly he dipped the utensil into the stew and brought it to his mouth. A few quick blows and the spoon was brought to his mouth, where he slurped it, savoring the flavor. Fugaku and Mikoto watched confused as tears ran down their eldest son's cheeks. Itachi turned to them, a smile on his face. It's so good. It's just like I remembered, so good, brother. Why are you crying? Itachi froze in his place, another spoonful of stew halfway to his mouth. His lips quivered as he turned slowly to find a young Sasuke standing behind him, his big round eyes curiously appraising his brother. Itachi sucked in a lungful of air and shook. Sasuke? Itachi pushed himself off of his comfy pillow and crept forward on his hands and knees toward what he was sure was a ghost. His hand rose shakily and he poked a surprised Sasuke in the forehead. His breath caught in his throat when the child cried out in protest and he crushed the little boy against his chest. It's real. It's really real. You're all alive. We're together again. Mikoto smiled at her eldest son's antics and put her hand on Itachi's head. You're going to be late, Itachi. She's on her way over. You'd better go get ready. Itachi's head whipped around to face her. Who's coming? His mother's smile widened as she turned back to her cooking. A knock from the front door echoed throughout the house and Sasuke ran out of the room, shouting that he would answer it. As if you didn't know. Ah, there she is. Itachi turned slowly to the doorway where he heard footsteps and his heart nearly stopped when he gazed up into his lover's face. Her gentle smile warmed his heart and he suddenly didn't care if this was real or not. He stood and crossed the room and, taking her in his arms, kissed her deeply. He wanted nothing more than the family and woman that he loved. This beautiful lie was better than the ugly truth. Madara watched, furious, as Itachi gave into the genjutsu with a blissful smile, his arms open as if accepting something or someone. He would not be taken by this illusion. He would not succumb to this farce. Closing his eyes, so as to better concentrate on fighting off this intrusion on his mind, he focused on breathing, knowing that his own body was real. Brother? Madara's eyes wanted to snap open so badly. But he knew if they opened, he would succumb to this hateful illusion. The timbre of the voice was just as he remembered. If he opened his eyes and saw the visage of his brother, then he would not be able to come back. He knew that. It's not really you, Izuna. I know that. It's just an illusion that is torturing me. Illusions aren't real and my Sharingan knows that. I know that. A tinkling laugh came from behind him and his heart fluttered. Oh, but this delusion was cruel. Now it had begun to imitate her. Husband, why won't you look at me? Madara took in a shuddering, angry breath, his teeth grinding against each other. You're not her. My wife has been dead for decades. Of course it's me, husband. Here, I'll even prove it. Sharingan eyes snapped open when a pair of soft arms wrapped around him from behind and a familiar weight pressed into his back. The arms squeezed him in a way that he would never forget as an almost forgotten voice breathed into his ear. We're here, husband. And we'll never go away. Ever again. Madara heard her words, but his eyes remained locked onto his brother's face. Izuna smiled at his brother and nodded his head. Yes, brother, we're real. Now stop being foolish and hold your wife. She's missed you. Madara sucked in a lungful of air and spun around, his arms encircling his wife's waist as he crushed his lips to hers. This was his test if this was real. Her taste, the feel of her rose-petal soft lips, her smell, it was all uniquely hers. This had to be real. Why, then, did it feel so wrong? Why did it feel like it wasn't there? His wife happily returned the kiss, melding her body against his as Suna laughed joyously. See, brother? It's as real can be. Our Sharingan can't be fooled by illusions. Madara nodded his head as he cradled his wife against him. Yes, he had been foolish. But he still felt like a fool. Suna laughed some more as he clapped his brother on the shoulder. Why, the only way to fool the Sharingan is with another Sharingan. And if you've been fooled, then there's no way to check it. You'd need to check it with another Sharingan. Madara nodded his head, happy with that explanation until something clicked. He was ecstatic to see his family again, but something nagged at his mind. His family wasn't under a genjutsu. Their own Sharingan would have caught it. Perhaps it was only him? There were no other Sharingan in existence, and he wouldn't take his family's eyes. No, there was another eye that possessed an ability unknown even to him. Hatake Kakashi. The background of the scene darkened as Madara pushed his wife away. Tears poured down her face as Suna caught her. Husband, why do you push me away? Surely you're not leaving again? Madara shook his head, his brain now fuzzy as his psyche fought against the power of Susanoo. Things began to fade in and out as reality and genjutsu pushed against one another, one overlapping the other, confusing him even more. He had to be sure. His wife hung off his right side, pleading with him to stop as his brother tried to reason with him. As reality and illusory perception began to blend into a cocktail of confustication, Madara's muddled mind kept grasping onto one thing. One of these had to be real, either his family or the muck and rubble before him, and only one man could help him now. Hatake Kakashi and that single Sharingan Tenten and Shino leapt back to safety, each cradling a drained Hyuga in their arms. Miji and Hinata had put up quite a fight with Hungry Ghost Realm, but their Juken relied on chakra to be effective and the fat man just absorbed their blows like a sponge. Before long, the two had been drained of most of their chakra, leaving them weak and helpless. Kiba and Akamaru engaged the rotund warrior next, giving the weapons mistress and the Kakai master time to get the two Hyuga to safety. After checking their vitals, the two returned to back up the feral fighter of the group. Shino was worried. This body, no, this corpse, as his bugs had informed him, was making a mockery of everything they did. It stood there, with its ever-present scowl and gray, ringed eyes, not saying a word. It reminded him so much of the attitudes of many of his own family. For but a moment, he wondered if this was how the enemies of the Aburame saw them. But even an Aburame tried to stir the emotions of their enemies in battle. This thing wouldn't even do that, and it infuriated him. Any bugs he sent to attack Pain simply fell to the ground as soon as they touched the time-stilled flesh. And Hinata and Miji had proven that hand-to-hand combat was not the answer. Even now, he could see Kiba and Akamaru slowing down, though they were fighting valiantly. Nothing seemed to touch him. His eyes shifted when he saw Tenten preparing herself out of the corner of his eyes. She would have to take point against this foe. A Kakai floated to Akamaru's shoulder and warned him of what was to come. A bark signaled Kiba and the two began to turn the Pain so it couldn't see what was happening. The duo began to lead the Pain away from Tenten and into position. Tenten waited until she was sure the peripheral vision of Pain was no longer focused on her and unleashed a barrage of kunai at his back. The Konoha ninja all watched in shock as he evaded every weapon thrown without ever looking. In the shadows, Human Realm sat crouched, waiting for opportunity to knock. Hungry Ghost Realm had decimated this team. Of course, not many could stand against the chakra-absorbing ghoul. He could see the Aburame watching with hard eyes as the girl continued to chuck every last weapon she had at the fat body, only for everyone to miss. He let his chakra disruptor rods fly just as the Kakai master came to his realization, there's another one. His warning was not fast enough, however, as a rod found its way into his back and the sides of Akamaru and Kiba, shocking them into submission as their chakra began to move about of its own volition. Tenten spun when she heard the shout and batted the rod aside, only to see Shino get taken out by a rod as well. The Aburame fell like a sack of bricks and his bugs swarmed out around him, agitated by the disruption of their host's chakra. Human Realm stepped out of the shadows and strode purposefully towards Tenten, who moved to the side and stood before Hinata and Niji, her sword at the ready. The ponytailed body cocked its head to the side, as if perplexed. Why do you stand there as if you can harm me? Do you not know I'm a god? I can end your existence in a heartbeat. Tenten gripped her sword tighter and narrowed her eyes as she watched the fat Pain step beside the other. You're not my god. And you never will be. She barely got her sword up to block the rod that Human Realm thrust at her, only to gasp as Hungry Ghost Realm slid one into her side. She stumbled backwards and fell on the ground, helpless as she watched the two stalk toward Niji and Hinata and slam more of the rods into their bodies. Hot tears ran down her face as she watched the blood seep from the wounds. She was confused though, as to why he didn't kill any of them. Pain saw the look of confusion on her face and stared down at her before nailing her hands to the stone behind her with another rod. I'm leaving you alive as a bargaining chip. I haven't killed anyone yet of your generation. I need you alive for the time being so that the Kyubi Jinchuriki will know that I am God. I hold your lives in my hands. With but a whim, I can kill you all at once. Such is the power and wrath of God. Tenten could only look on at the destruction the man had caused, her entire team, all her friends, powerless. Zetsu melted out of the ground away from the battleground he'd just escaped. He was a high-rank ninja, but even he knew when it was time to retreat. The Suna ninja were bad enough, but the two summons made moving about incredibly difficult. It was almost like they knew where he would pop up. His body was littered with cuts from all of the various jutsu used and he wasn't sure, but he thought he'd been nicked by one of the boy's poisonous needles. His body was resilient, but nowhere near the level that Kisame's was. Vaguely, he wondered if his comrade was still bedridden or had decided to join the festivities. He couldn't remember being this tired after a fight in a long time. Not that he'd had many fights in recent years. Perhaps that was why his senses were dulled slightly. Perhaps that's why those children had gotten so many hits in on him. Well, he'd show them. If Pain left any of them alive, he was going to personally kill them himself. He'd rip their limbs off one by one and eat them while they watched, saving the juicy intestines for last. Perhaps the years of inactivity as a shinobi had dulled his senses somewhat. But he was still the best infiltrator and spy around. That's why it was so astounding to him when his trained ears didn't hear the familiar whistling nor his trained senses feel it when his left arm suddenly fell from its socket. He looked down in surprise as his blood flowed freely from where his arm had been. He was surprised that the pain had not registered yet. That's when he felt the breath down his neck and froze. I told you that I'd rend your flesh from your bones. Nothing in this world can save you once I have your scent. I'll follow you anywhere you go, and as injured as you are, you can't go far. Sanzoku's teeth shone as he grinned and began to grow larger and larger. Zetsu's yellow eyes widened in shock. Nothing he had ever seen had prepared him for a summons like the raccoon. Scream for me, bitch. Off in the distance, Temari and Kankuro heard the screams and yells of both Zetsu and Sanzoku. The siblings shared a look and then took off for where they sensed the most chakra, leaving behind the horrid squeals of a dying cannibal and the broken remains of Kankuro's blank-eyed Jiraiya watched intently as the Kumo shinobi once again rushed Pain in a wave and were again repelled. The Raikage rushed in for the 5-second interval only to find himself in a game of cat and mouse as God Realm backpedaled away until the round was up. Ma and Pa gathered the necessary energy for what was to follow and opened their eyes again. We're ready when you are, Jiraiya-chan. Good. Prepare yourselves. I don't know if this will work or not. Don't tell me what to do, little boy. Ma, not now. The three watched as Pain repelled and the two tiny toads immediately began to croak, singing their song. Pain heard the song and narrowed his eyes. He'd need to end this quickly. Jiraiya was too dangerous to allow the sage to live any longer. He carefully counted out the 5 seconds, and just as the illusion was beginning to take hold, he cast his hand forward and pulled Jiraiya in. Jiraiya's eyes snapped open when he felt the tug on his body, and the song stopped immediately as the trio flew toward Pain's outstretched hand. Jiraiya's eyes widened in realization of what was about to happen. He watched as Pain's hand stiffened so that his fingers were pointed forward. Jiraiya was about to be impaled through the stomach. Jiraiya hit the arm at high velocity, his innards rushing out his back as Pain's hand displaced them. Blood rushed from his mouth as the Kumo shinobi looked on in horror. Jiraiya's eyes glazed for a moment before the life shot back into them as he used his last strength to grip onto Pain's arm. Let's see you dodge while carrying all this weight, Nagato. I'll see you in hell. The two toads on his shoulder jumped free as his chakra faded, shouting out for him just as Tsunade entered the area with her group in tow. Her scream echoed across the expanse and Jiraiya smiled as he coughed up more blood, his voice coming out in a whisper. Heh, tears for me, Tsunade? And here I didn't think you cared. Tsunade collapsed on her knees, unblinking as she stared at the sight of Jiraiya's now lifeless body hanging from Pain's arm. She couldn't believe it, another of her friends, her loved ones gone, all because of some egomaniac with a god complex. Rage boiled within her and she rose to her feet until someone clapped a hand on her shoulder. She looked up into the sad, blue eyes of Naruto. No, Bachan. No. Her rage immediately subsided and tears began to take over instead. The sadness and anger in Naruto's eyes seemed to wash over everyone present. Pain simply stood there, unimpressed as Human Realm and Hungry Ghost Realm landed beside God Realm and pulled Jiraiya off forcefully from the arm with a wet, sucking sound before casting the body to the middle of the open space. Jiraiya's body hit the ground hard and rolled a couple of times till it came to a stop, his face still smiling. Tsunade's tears redoubled and Sakura put an arm around her to support her as Naruto strode to his sensei's body. By now, every one of the invaders had gathered to help, but stood at the edge, not willing to interrupt. Silence roared in Amigakure as Naruto kneeled beside Jiraiya. You didn't deserve to die like this, killed by a former pupil. He died by my will. That was enough. Naruto didn't bother to look up. Pain wasn't his concern at the moment. He picked up Jiraiya's body and brought it back to Tsunade, setting it down beside her. Just so you know, Jinchuriki, I am God here. I will bring peace to this land through my forced rule. There will be no war under my rule. It will be utopia. And those who stand in the way of my justice, my will, become dust. Naruto tried to ignore the obvious bait, but it was becoming harder. In the back of his mind, a presence stirred that he had long since thought was forever silenced. I have your friends, Jinchuriki. A simple pulse of my chakra, and they all die of heart failure. No, they won't. I've already had my clones looking for them before we arrived. The rods are being removed as we speak and they're being taken to safety. A slight quirk of the lips was all that showed Pain's annoyance. Then I suppose more drastic measures are to be taken. God Realm's hand raised and Karui was pulled into his grasp, dangling above the ground by her neck. Kira, despite his weakness, yelled out to her and Pain turned in his direction. Give yourself to me or she dies. If you come voluntarily, I'll let the Kumo ninja go peacefully. Karui glared over his hand and spat into his stoic face. Fuck you, snap. Pain let her body tumble to the ground and wiped away the spittle. Too slow. Perhaps one from Konoha this time? Kira and the Raikage were mortified. Was the man that untouchable? Pain raised his hand again and Kakashi's eyes widened when he felt the pull on him. His hands flashed through hand signs as he was tugged along and his Raikiri was ready by the time he reached Pain. God Realm watched impassively as Hungry Ghost Realm stepped before him and absorbed the blow, sucking all of the chakra with it. Kakashi gasped at the pull on his chakra and Human Realm caught him by the forehead. Come to me or Hatake Kakashi dies. No. Pain turned his head to find Madara behind him, without his mask, and his eyes looking dazed. No, not yet. Give him to me. Yes, brother, I know that. But I have to be sure. No, I can't simply do that. Madara, are you alright? Tobi's not sure if Madara's alright. Give us Kakashi. I will tell Tobi if we're alright. Human Realm handed Kakashi over and Madara grabbed him by both arms and slammed him to the ground. Yes, wife. I'll be very careful. Pain, hold him. I can't have him moving while brother is trying to distract me. The fat pain held Kakashi down while Madara knelt beside the man. All the shinobi watched as Madara plucked his left eye out without a cry of pain. "No, brother, it's not the same as when I did it to you. See? I still have my wonderful eye. This is just to see if this is an illusion." Kakashi could only watch in horror as the fingers descended towards his Sharingan. Madara had almost reached his socket when a huge vine erupted from the ground, smashed the Uchiha in the chest and sent him flying. The pain-holding Kakashi barely avoided the swipe and leapt back to safety, leaving the vine to hover protectively over Kakashi. Naruto's green aura had returned and his voice was ragged as he raised his staff. "No. You can't have his eye. But Tobi needs that eye. Madara must know what's real." The black fire of Amaterasu roared from where Madara had been thrown and latched upon the vine, burning it to a crisp. Madara was upon Kakashi in a heartbeat, straddling him, and thrust his fingers into the copy ninja's socket, pulling out the bloody Sharingan. Kakashi cried out in agony, but could do nothing as Madara stared down at him. "Yes, brother, I agree. This man did steal our precious eye. And you know what they say, an eye for an eye." Blood hit Kakashi's mask as he gurgled, a kunai sticking out of his chest. Madara giggled as he stood up and put the eye in his own socket, hissing as it took hold. He blinked and then began to moan. "No, no, 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 no. I can still see both. It's not fair. Why can't I tell if you're real? I want to know which is real." For Naruto, time stopped in that moment. His heartbeat slowed, his motor functions shut down, and the green aura pulsed wildly. The blonde Jinchuriki opened his eyes to a familiar sight and a frightening one. The cage of the Kyuubi was opened and the beast sat on its haunches in the light, its mouth open in what he was sure was a grin. Beside the massive beast stood a face he would never forget. It was the old man that had entrusted him with the power of the green. Ancient eyes gazed upon him and a small smile lifted a white beard. "Well, it seems it's time." Naruto shook his head, unsure of what the old man meant. "Time? For what?" "To make your choice. The prophecy concerning you is nigh. Here, you will either bring the world to a new level of happiness and prosperity or destroy it." The old man silenced the growling of the Kyuubi with a single hand and continued. "Make no mistake, boy, this is monumental. You were never supposed to have a say in the matter. You were never supposed to go to Suna. You were never supposed to attain my power. You were never supposed to meet the raccoons. This situation should never have been, and because of that, you get a choice in what happens next." But why?" Wizened eyebrows lifted and eyes turned into a happy U-shape. "Because, Uzumaki Naruto, you fought fate and destiny and won. You made your own path, but you still have to choose. My power or the Kyuubi no Yoko's. Choose my power, boy. I'll lay waste to your enemies, I'll slay them for you. I'll destroy everyone who has ever hurt you. All for you. You won't hurt anymore. There will be no more pain." Naruto listened to the honeyed words that poured off the beast's tongue and nodded before turning to the old man. "What's your argument?" A single eye opened and a dry chuckle rang throughout the room. "You're going to die." "What?" "You're going to die, one way or the other. You can either be a savior or you can be a demon. One or the other. But I can give you something that the Kyuubi can't before you go." "What's that?" "I'll let you say goodbye to Temari before you die." Naruto turned from the Kyuubi, eliciting a snarl, and was about to comply when the old man raised his hand. "Make no mistake, Uzumaki. This is a mere courtesy. You will not have long. And there is a price for accepting my power. You will become the embodiment of the green, just as you would become the embodiment of the Kyuubi. I will finally pass on, just as you will one day pass on that power to another worthy person. But it will be millennia before your mantle can be passed. Do you accept?" Naruto thought for a moment before nodding. "Yes. So long as I can say goodbye." A long slow sigh escaped the old man's lips and he turned to the beast. "Back to your cage, fox. Our time in this plane is ended." The QB ranted and snarled as the door slammed shut against it, throwing it back into the depths of the cage. Naruto watched as he began to fade out, a green aura encompassing him again. I'll let you see here right before you pass on. No sooner, no later. Good fortune, Uzumaki Naruto. And goodbye. The ninja all watched as Naruto began to glow with an unearthly power. His voice rang of a deep timbre as the green tendrils began to slide off of him. Leave this place. Go to safety. You have little time. Temari took a step forward and Naruto cringed. Don't do that. Just go. He turned to look at her over his shoulder and gave her a small, sad smile. Make sure everyone gets to safety. Get out of Amigakure. I'll see you soon, Temari. Tsubasa leaned down low enough that his head almost touched the ground. Naruto, are you yes? And I will complete my end of the bargain. All I ask is that you take everyone out of here. It will no longer be safe. Goodbye, Tsubasa. It was an honor to serve you. Tsubasa nodded his head and summoned several members of his clan to assist in getting the ninja out. As all the living were transported, many under protest, he turned to the now glowing Naruto. You're the last, you know. There will never be another summoner for us. All I ask is that you take care of her. Take care of them all in the world I create. Hi. I can do that. Farewell, Uzumaki Naruto. May the heavens guide you to a restful slumber. Tsubasa galloped off after the others, leaving Pain and Madara facing Naruto, whose eyes were now totally green. Madara tilted his head to the side and blinked, his eye still bleeding. Why are you glowing? I can see it through both of my eyes. That's inconsequential. Tell me, Nagato, was it worth it? Pain nodded his head. To create a new world, the old one has to die. This is the truth. Naruto titled his head back as the power coursed through him. His life on Earth would end when things had run their course, but his responsibility would be eternal. Nature, Nagato. New life is built on the death of the old, but the old is not simply destroyed. It's used to help create the new. That's what I'll be doing. Instead of razing it to the ground as you would, I will simply build upon the old world. I would give them a utopia, free of war and strife, with a new god. What can you offer them? Eden. And the choice of how to best use it. Our sensei's teachings will be the model for the new world. Help others, treat people with kindness, these are things he taught us. You warped them, I embraced them. The weak don't live to serve the strong live to serve the weak. The words of a mortal fool. Naruto's green eyes became slits as the power built to its crescendo inside him. They were the words of the god of shinobi, the teacher of our teacher. Without warning, the power exploded inside of Naruto and his head and arms snapped back as a wave of green washed over everything. Wherever it touched, new life sprang forth from mud and rubble. Vines wove about the feet of Madara and Pain and held them in place, and lifted up the bodies of Jiraiya and Kakashi out of the muck reverently. Outside Amigakure's walls, the shinobi watched as the green wave passed over, leaving grass and flowers just outside the borders. Inside the city, trees began to erupt from the ground, tall trees of every distinct and beautiful kind. They marveled at their friend's power, but Temari sat with her brothers, her chin resting on her crossed arms. Naruto had said he would see her again. But it felt like he was saying goodbye. Naruto's arms fell as the power stabilized and his unearthly gaze settled on the men in front of him. They watched as he began to slowly stride toward them, every step taken bringing forth flowers that bloomed and then died. He stopped in front of Pain and brought his staff to chest level, aiming the end at God Realm's chest. Nagato grunted in frustration as he tried to force his realms to move. He would not be taken by this insignificant little insect. He was Pain. He was a god. No mortal could stand up to the power of a god. He didn't see Konan turn from the glass, so caught up in his struggles. He didn't see her hold out her hand. He didn't see her ever-present paper flower reform into a kunai. His Rinnegan eyes could see many things, but they couldn't predict betrayal. Nagato only saw her step in front of his chair and looked up to tell her to go away. He froze when he saw the tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. This is for Yahiko. Nagato's eyes crossed to look at the paper blade lodged in his forehead, and he gurgled a bit in surprise. He'd never been hurt since his eyes had changed. This sensation of floating, what was it? Was this death? But gods can't die, they're immortal. The last thing he saw with his many visions was a weeping Conan leaving through the shattered window, and the scowling face of Uzumaki Naruto as his staff thrust into Yahiko's chest. His last thought was that he didn't know which broke his heart more. Naruto frowned when Pain's 3 bodies went limp and looked up when he heard glass shatter. The blue-haired woman he had heard about flew out of the window, her paper wings shaped like that of a moth. How beautiful. Yet, some moths were poisonous, and he couldn't let such a dangerous insect roam in the world to come. Madara watched through his hazy vision as Naruto held out a hand in Conan's direction and a huge Venus flytrap emerged from the ground. The giant plant grew to the woman's level and swallowed her whole, the acids in its digestive tract already working on her papery wings. It wouldn't be long before she was digested. He couldn't have her sowing poison in the new world. His gaze settled on Madara, and the man squirmed. Are you real? Or are you a trick? Naruto leaned forward and beckoned with his finger. A rose bush grew behind the Uchiha, and the blonde picked a particularly thorny rose, brushing it against Madara's face. The man hissed in pain, and Naruto spoke. Tell me what you see, and I'll tell you if it's real. I see my family, my wife and my brother. I see the Kyubi Jinchuriki glowing with an ethereal power that is green. I see Amagakure overrun by flora. Your family is an illusion. Someone of your ilk doesn't get to see their loved ones when they die. Why? Because hell is torture. And seeing your family wouldn't be torture to you. The rose lengthened into a spike and Naruto drove it into Madara's chest. There would be no teleporting away, no phasing out. The man simply gasped and began to babble again. Wife, why are you fading? Don't go. Brother, don't go. Why is everything getting dark? Is this reality? Was everything a lie? Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. He didn't feel anything from Pain or Madara's death. He didn't feel anything from Conan's. Perhaps that was the curse of being the embodiment of the green? Just like nature, you were neutral to everything? No, he wouldn't be like that. Deciding it was time to give in, he gave himself over to the power and heard a voice in the back of his mind. You have little time. Make it count. Temari had had her eyes closed as she prayed and had only opened them to see if anything had changed. To her surprise, she found herself on a street corner in Konoha. It seemed very familiar, but she couldn't figure out why. Don't you remember? It's the first place we met. Temari whipped around to find Naruto standing behind her, his hands in the pockets of his jacket. She ran to him and wrapped him in a hug, pressing herself into his chest. His arms wrapped around her as well, and the two stood there for a moment in silence before she broke it. Why are we in Konoha? We aren't. Then where are we? Naruto gave her another small smile and motioned for her to follow. Come with me. We don't have much time. She walked beside him down the street, her ears catching the sound of feet shuffling behind them. A glance over her shoulder revealed an ancient man, leaning on a staff. Who's he? A friend. Don't worry about him. I have to tell you something. Sit. I'll push you. Temari hadn't realized where they were going or when they got there, but they were in front of the Konoha Academy, at the swing set. She obediently sat down and Naruto began to push her. I'm not coming home, Temari. She slammed her feet into the ground, stopping her momentum and leaped out of the seat. What do you mean? I can't come home. He gave me this time to say goodbye. I wanted to let you know that I love you and I'll miss you. She shook her head. No, you have to come home. We have a life to build together. Naruto shook his head sadly and put his hands on her shoulders. Leaning forward, he placed a kiss on her forehead. I'm sorry. Promise me that you'll find happiness, Temari. My happiest times were spent with you. Just promise me that you'll be happy. Tears stung her eyes as she glared at him. How can I be happy without you? Take me with you. He turned his head to the side. I can't. Where I'm going, you can't follow. She whipped around to the old man, her teeth grinding. You. Don't take him. Please. And if you have to, take me with him. I can't do that. I don't get to say who stays and who goes. I'm only here to guide him. Temari's shoulders shook and tears began to roll down her face. But I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I know you do. And I want to stay. But I can't. This is part of my sacrifice, Temari. She looked into his blue eyes, locking them to her teal ones. Haven't you sacrificed enough? Naruto smiled at her and wrapped her in a hug once more, crushing her to him, before leaning back and kissing her deeply. Temari tried to make the kiss last as long as she could until Naruto gently pushed her away and the old man touched his shoulder, not daring to look at her. It's time. Naruto nodded his head and gave her one more gentle kiss as he began to fade out. I love you, Temari. With all my heart. Be happy. Temari jolted out of her stupor when Kankuro shook her shoulder. Temari, you okay? You started crying. Her response was to sniffle and then to launch herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face into his chest. Kankuro, not knowing what to do, awkwardly patted her back as he looked to Amigakure when it happened. Naruto never really opened his eyes the way Temari did. He simply let the power overtake him and pushed it outward, bending it to his will. He would give this world an Eden and a guideline to live by. He would bring peace to this world by taking it back to its roots. After all, if there is plenty, then there is no reason for war. And if the strong protect, then there are no weak. The green's new embodiment pushed its power to the limits and Amigakure exploded into life and color. The green aura rushed out from the center of the elemental nations and into every nook and cranny. The invading shinobi gasped as grass and glowers grew under their feet and fruit trees erupted from the ground beside them. The people of Iwa were astounded when their barren soil bore vegetables and fruit they had never seen began to grow. The people of Kumo watched as their rocky terrains began to flower and bloom and vines began to grow on their tower. The people of Kiri watched as their soil, always too wet for most things to grow, began to become overbearing with bounty. The people of Konoha, a land that had always been rich, watched as the forest surrounding them became bigger and more expansive. The people of Suna watched in awe from their walls as the desert surrounding them became one massive oasis. They cheered, for this could only be the doing of their own Uzumaki Naruto. Tsubasa and his tribe watched with both excitement and sadness as the green once again covered the earth. This was what they had wanted, but the price was so high. He hazarded a glance downward to Temari, who had a smaller Senzoku nudging her with his nose out of sympathy. A deep, rumbling sigh escaped his lips, and he ambled off back toward Amigakure. Come on. We should go see what happened. Color was everywhere as they walked through what used to be a great maze of pipes and water. Colors of every shade and hue popped up around them, surrounding them and bombarding their perceptions with a fusillade of flora. The group followed along behind Tsubasa, but two in particular trailed behind, knowing already what they would find. I'll miss him. Please don't say that I'll stay with you if you want me to. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. The various plants around them seemed to spread apart, leading them to where they needed to go. Tsubasa gasped when he came upon the site they had departed from and bowed his head. Everyone stepped around him to see what the matter was and gasped. Most started crying. Upon 3 seats made of vines sat the bodies of Naruto, Jiraiya, and Kakashi. One by one, they all came forward to see them. Temari wouldn't go, and neither would Tsunade. It was too horrible for either of them. Shikamaru limped to stand before Naruto, whose chin rested on his chest as if he were asleep and squinted his eyes. There's writing above each of their seats. The others all calmed down as he began to read, starting with Jiraiya, then Kakashi, and then Naruto. I believe in a better world. Those who abandon their friends are trash. The weak do not serve the strong serve the weak. Words to live by. It's their legacy to you. The shinobi all turned to the Raccoon King, their attention given. They sacrificed everything so that you would have a better world. Do not waste it. Do not make their deaths be in vain. Hachikura, in a rare moment of lucidity and seriousness, turned to where the three shinobi were seated and knelt down. I swear on my life that this world will be better. I'll bring about change with my own two hands. And one by one, the others followed him, swearing to change the world for the better. Temari looked up from her spot, her cheeks and eyes red from crying, as she whispered to her departed lover. But what is a new world when my world is gone? Epilogue. Dear Naruto, it was so very hard to get out of bed this morning. It's been a while since I last wrote, but then, as the years went by, I somewhat forgot the purpose. I'm sorry for that. I know you must have been lonely without me writing. I know that sounds silly. Let me fill you in on what's happened since I last wrote. We now live in a world without war, one where everyone lives in harmony. Oh, there's still little minor hiccups every now and then, but there have been no major battles or skirmishes in decades. Everyone heard of your sacrifice and chose to honor it. I was sad when you left, even though now I understand why you did. You didn't have a choice. I'm proud of you for being as brave as you were. I don't know if I could have done that in your place. I miss you, Naruto. I've missed you every day since that dreadful, horrible day. I tried to be happy for you, I really did. I tried to move on. I watched our friends get married, have children, and be happy. I watched your legacy grow, even when you weren't around. I've tried to uphold that legacy. I know you still watch over me. I know that, because the gardenias grow thicker in our home than they do anywhere else in the world. And there's that particular yellow rose garden outside the bedroom window that always grows in the shape of a heart. I miss you, Naruto. The few years we had together weren't enough. I want to hold you. I want to kiss you. I want to just know that you're there. I'd storm the gates of hell if I knew you were there, and I'd do the same thing to heaven. I never had any children of my own. I tried to find someone else to love, because you said you wanted me happy. There was this one boy from Kusagaku that I thought I loved, but no one could ever compare to you. My heart belongs to you, Naruto. It always has, it always will. You are my happiness. It's been years and now our friends are passing on as well. I'm one of the oldest, so I guess I'm one of the next to go. My yellow hair that you loved so much is white now, and I can't hold my fan anymore. Haven't picked the damn thing up in years. It's disheartening actually. I've chronicled your life into a book entitled It The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja 2, in honor of Jiraiya. It's popular amongst the children. Speaking of children, your class all graduated, just as you said they would. The Chunin exams are more of a spectacle now than they are a simulation. But your kids swept the whole thing. By the way, your two top students ended in a tie. They couldn't beat each other and they dedicated the match to your memory. It was sweet and creepy, in a hero worship kind of way. Tsunade passed on a couple years after Amigakure. I'm sure you've run into her up there. I'm sure that you're still getting onto her for gambling. I'm sure she's still wrangling Jiraiya away from bathhouses. And I'm sure Kakashi still reads Jiraiya's porn. That's their heavens. Want to hear what mine is? You and me. That's heaven. At least, for me. I know I've done some bad things in life, but you did so much for me. If I do end up going to hell for some reason, I hope they let angels visit. Just a kiss, that's all I'd ask for. Just one more kiss. It was so very hard to get up this morning, Naruto. So very, very hard. Do you want to know why it was so hard to get up this morning, Sabaku no Temari? A wrinkled face turned to the voice from where she sat at a desk and white eyebrows rose. An old man with a staff stood before her, an old man that she would never forget. It's because you never got up. Hello, Temari. It's good to see you again. Temari narrowed her eyes and turned back to her letter. You're late. A gray eyebrow quirked and hands rubbed on the staff. Beg pardon? You're late. You're 57 years late. I told you before, Temari, I don't get to choose who goes when. I'm merely here to escort you to your fate. The old woman stood to her feet, her bones creaking, and huffed. Fine. Let's go and get this over with. The old man nodded once and tapped his staff on the ground. Temari blinked, and next thing she knew, she was in a hallway with 2 doors and a robed figure between them. She gasped when she looked at her hands and found the skin to be soft and smooth. A few slaps at her face and she found no wrinkles. A happy laugh escaped her lips, causing the old man to smile. I thought you would appreciate being at the age when you last saw Naruto. Now then, let's take you to your final guide. Temari swallowed the lump in her throat and followed the old man to the mysterious robed figure. He whispered something to the guard of the doors and the head bobbed once, in understanding. The staff wielder turned to Temari with a smile and put a kind hand on her shoulder. This is where we part. My colleague will take you on your way from here. Do as he says. He'll guide you to where you are supposed to be. Temari gave him a smile and nodded her head in understanding before walking past him and standing before the figure. I'm ready. What do I have to do? The hooded head cocked to the side and a scratchy voice echoed from the darkness. Choose your door. Your final place will be beyond the one you choose. Good luck. Temari stared at the figure in disbelief. What? This is how you guys resolve people's afterlives? By a game of freaking chance? Do not question. Only do. Temari huffed and looked at the 2 doors. They were identical down to the doorknob. How was she supposed to know which one to choose? Her hand twitched from one to the other before that scratchy voice broke the silence. Choose. Before she could think, she opened the door on the right and stepped into pure blackness. The door behind her shut and a hand found its way to her shoulder. Do not fear. I shall guide you to your place. Temari fought back the tears in her eyes. After all these years, trying to make up for bad deeds so she could see her Naruto again, and she ends up in the darkness, it was her worst nightmare come true. She sniffled and the robed figure looked over at her. Do not weep. We do not yet know what your place will be. Temari cast hopeful eyes to the side. You mean I'm not damned? I don't know. She sobered up a bit at that and they continued to walk for what seemed like forever until eventually they came to a lone tree standing in the middle of the darkness, with a simple plank swing hanging from a thick limb. The robed figure stepped to the side and grabbed a rope. Sit. I'll push you. Temari's face screwed into a scowl and she snarled at whoever was under the cloth. How dare you? That's one of the last things Naruto did for me. If I'm to be punished, then so be it, but don't you dare think I'll stand for that. The figure was not moved. Sit. Temari's anger subsided and she sat down forlornly on the wooden plank, her head hanging low as she whispered. Whatever I did to deserve this, I'm sorry. And what, my dear Temari, would you have to be sorry for? Seriously, all those years you knew me, and you didn't think I'd pull one last prank on you? Temari's back stiffened and her neck slowly turned to look over her shoulder, hope swelling in her heart. The hood fell back to reveal the golden locks and bewhiskered face of her beloved, his trademark grin in full effect. Hey, babe. It took you forever to get here. The next thing he knew, he was on his back with a hysterical Temari on top of him, kissing him, touching him, anything to make sure he was real. After she had calmed down, he sat upright with her in his arms. She had so much to ask him, and after several minutes of inane questions, she asked the one he'd been waiting for. So is this heaven? Yes, it's our heaven. She looked around the darkness again and quirked an eyebrow. Our heaven? It's black. Well, duh. It's not finished. I've been waiting for you. Everyone's heaven is different, you know, and mine wasn't complete without you. Temari nodded and let him pull her to her feet. She smiled at the familiar touch and melded against his body again. So how do we complete it? Naruto put a finger to his chin and thought for a second. A devilish smile later, and she was worried. It left immediately when he put his fist under her chin, tilting her head up. How about this? We close our eyes, kiss until we can't hold our breath any longer, and then we open them. That's it? That's it. She smiled as she threw her arms around his neck and whispered. That sounds like a damned good plan. The two locked lips, and for a moment, even heaven seemed to stop for them. A love that had been unrequited for decades, one that would last eternity, had finally come back to itself. Temari broke off after a minute, gasping for breath, and heard Naruto whisper in her ear. Open your eyes, Temari. Slowly, ever so slowly, she cracked her eyes open, and the splendor and beauty of their heaven caused her breath to hitch and a lump to form in her throat. Sheer words could not form the magnificence and scope of what lay before her. To a blissfully happy Temari, it could only be summed up in 2 words. Oh my. The end.